Hello everyone, welcome back to GraveTales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. I want you to leave a comment on where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, be sure to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get into tonight's stories. Story 1. It started with a dare, the kind that sounds stupid until you're knee-deep in something you can't explain and no one will believe. It was just past 2 a.m. on a rainy Thursday when I found myself wandering the third floor of Holloway Hall Library at Bridgewater University, a Gothic old building that students mostly avoided after dark. The air up there was heavy, stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. I was the last one left from our group. Everyone else bailed after we heard the janitor's keys jingling a few floors below, but I was too stubborn to give up. The dare was simple. Find the rumored hidden reading room that only shows up when you're alone, when the lights flicker, and when you knock 3 times on the rusted shelf labeled 1893 to 1905. Stupid, right? That's what I thought too, until I did it. The shelf in question stood crooked at the end of a shadowy corridor, half covered in dust and spiderwebs, a relic untouched by maintenance. My phone's flashlight flickered once. Dead pixels danced at the edge of the screen, but it worked well enough. I walked up, placed my hand on the wood, and gave 3 slow knocks. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt a breeze, impossibly cold, drift across my arm from what should have been a solid wall. The shelf groaned, and then it moved, maybe 2 inches, maybe 3, just enough to reveal a narrow gap that led into pitch darkness. No dust, no cobwebs, just black. I hesitated only a second before sliding in sideways. It wasn't just a room. It was a passage, a steep, sloping corridor that descended deeper than the library's floor plan should have allowed. I don't know how long I was walking, but the silence felt oppressive, and the walls seemed to breathe. When I emerged, I was in a windowless, concrete room the size of a classroom, dimly lit by a single hanging bulb swaying overhead. The first thing I noticed was the table in the center, old and warped, with dozens of yellowed newspaper clippings pinned to the surface with rusted thumbtacks. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, each labeled by year, but it was the far wall that froze me. A long, cracked corkboard with names scrawled in red ink, almost like blood, beneath a crude hand-drawn timeline. The earliest date read 1926, and every few inches another name, another year. The most recent was 2022, last year. Then there was a space, a line drawn but not labeled. And then, at the very end, 2025, Jeremy W. Kincaid. My name, my exact full name. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of clippings that scattered like dead leaves. I kept saying it wasn't real, just some weird prank or art project. But deep down, I knew better. These weren't random names. They were victims. Every single one had a news clipping attached. Local girl missing after leaving library. Professor found dead in locked office. Student presumed drowned. Body never recovered. All local. All tied to the university. I grabbed one, then another, scanning for patterns. And there they were. Every victim had been seen near the library before vanishing or dying. And several, too many, were last seen around Holloway Hall. I should have left then. I should have burned the room down and walked away. But I didn't, because tucked beneath the timeline, half covered in a dusty manila folder, was a photo. A photo of me. Not from social media or school, this was different. It looked like it had been taken from across the street, through my apartment window. And on the back, written in the same red ink, "Next." I don't remember how I got out of that room. I know I backed away from the corkboard slowly, clinging to the edges of my sanity. The photo of myself still clutched in my shaking hand. I don't even remember the slope or the shelf shifting back into place behind me. One moment I was in that claustrophobic hidden chamber with its flickering bulb and stale air that tasted like copper and mildew, and the next, I was standing in the middle of the 3rd floor of the library again. Alone, the air suddenly much warmer, the silence not oppressive but simply quiet, like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with 3 notifications at once. Group chat. Yo, where'd you go, bro? Janitor's gone, you still in there? Text me when you're out, we dipped. I didn't reply. I just walked out in a daze, past the antique wooden desks and spiral staircases, through the lobby where the librarian at the front desk didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world felt washed out, like I had stepped through some invisible boundary into a different version of reality. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me or see someone ducking behind a tree, but the campus was eerily still. Couldn't sleep that night. I left every light on in my apartment, checked all the locks 3 times, and still lay awake in bed for hours holding the photo. I flipped it over again and again, tracing the ink with my thumb, whispering to myself, "Next for what?" The next morning, I skipped class and drove to the county records office. I needed to know if the names on that timeline were real, not just photoshopped headlines or a twisted prank. I pulled every local crime record from the last 100 years and started cross-referencing. My heart dropped with every match. Clara Reynolds, 1926, vanished on her walk home from the library after a late-night study session. Dr. Eugene Carter, 1951, found hanged in the basement stacks of Holloway Hall, ruled a suicide despite his hands being tied behind his back. Mark Hanley, 1978, disappeared during finals week, last seen on the 3rd floor. The more I found, the more nauseous I felt. Each incident lined up with the entries from the hidden room. And not only that, they followed a pattern. Every few years, someone vanished or was murdered under bizarre circumstances, always linked in some way to the library. The gaps between deaths weren't random either. They were getting shorter. At first, it was every 15 or 20 years, then every 10, then every 5, until now it was happening every year. 2020, 2021, 2022. And the line was moving toward me. I printed out everything I found and pinned it across my bedroom wall in a sad imitation of the hidden room's timeline, watching my name inch closer with every update. That's when the calls started. Always at night, always from an unknown number. The first few times, I let it ring, thinking it was just spam. Then I picked up. The voice was soft, female, barely above a whisper, but completely emotionless. "Jeremy, don't run." Click. I didn't sleep that night either. I unplugged my apartment phone and turned my cell off. But the next night, the ringing came from my laptop, then from the TV, then from the wall. One night, I woke up to the sound of my own voice calling my name, except I hadn't spoken. Something deep and guttural echoed back. Next, I tried telling people. I told my roommate Kyle, who laughed and said I'd been watching too many horror videos before bed. I showed him the photo from the hidden room. "Creepy," he admitted, "but you've got like 10 pictures of yourself online just like this. Could be anyone screwing with you." I told campus security about the hidden room, about the old records, about the voices. They wrote up a report but never followed up. One officer said it sounded like I was having a breakdown and suggested the counseling center. Even my girlfriend broke up with me after I got too intense. Whatever that means. I started noticing people watching me. Not just glancing, watching. A girl with long red hair stared at me through the library glass for a full 20 minutes before walking away without ever checking out a book. A professor I didn't recognize followed me all the way to the dining hall, then vanished into a side door that shouldn't have even been there. I checked my notes from past victims. Several had reported seeing someone days before they vanished. One student wrote in a journal entry that she felt like her reflection was slightly delayed. Another described seeing her own eyes blink in the mirror while she was completely still. I stopped using mirrors altogether after that. Then I got an envelope under my door. No return address, no stamps. Inside was another photo. Me again, this time sleeping. The window was closed, locked from the inside, but whoever took it had been in the room with me. On the back, "You're getting closer," I snapped. I tore my room apart looking for cameras, hidden mics, vents, anything. I found nothing. I even stayed at a friend's place off campus. But the same thing happened. New envelope, new photo. Still too late. I begged my professor for access to restricted archives, using the excuse that I was researching a history thesis. I didn't care anymore. I was spiraling. In the oldest university records, I found a journal belonging to a man named Edwin Callister, dated 1895. He was the original architect of Holloway Hall. In his notes, He referred to the library as a vessel for knowledge and blood alike. He mentioned the chamber that must never be found. And then, chillingly, he wrote, "A name appears every quarter century, then it halves, then halves again, until the line runs dry, until the last name is written by the last light." That phrase wouldn't leave me alone. Until the line runs dry. What did it mean? That someone was keeping track? That the names were part of some ritual? That this wasn't just a curse but a plan, with a deadline? I didn't eat. I barely slept. I moved everything I had to a storage locker across town, trying to get away from the apartment, the campus, the watchers. But the final straw came last week. I got a new letter. No photo this time. Just one line. "You have 6 days left." I checked the timeline on my wall. 6 days until October 23rd. The same day as the last victim, Megan Lively, who was found in the bell tower with her mouth sewn shut. 6 days. That's when I decided I had to go back to the room. I had to find it again, no matter the cost. And this time, I wasn't going in alone. I knew I couldn't do this alone again. Not after what I saw. Not with 6 days left. I didn't need backup exactly, I needed a witness. Someone else to see what I'd seen. Someone who could verify the room existed and maybe, just maybe, help me understand what was waiting for me at the end of that timeline. I thought of a girl I'd met in my criminology seminar named Mara. Sharp, curious, and more importantly, skeptical as hell. She'd once written a 10-page paper debunking urban legends and campus ghost stories, calling most of them poorly veiled coping mechanisms for collective trauma. If I could convince her, maybe I wasn't insane. Maybe what I saw was real. I cornered her after class, practically vibrating with desperation, and begged her to meet me at Holloway Hall after hours. I didn't even have to lie. I told her there was something buried in the stacks, something tied to a century of unsolved campus murders. She rolled her eyes but agreed, probably expecting me to pitch some lame podcast idea or scare her with ghost stories. Midnight came, and we met outside the library, the building looming behind us like a corpse carved from stone and stained glass. I had the old blueprint of the building printed out from the archives, and I'd circled the exact corridor where I found the rusted shelf. Mara brought a camcorder and a small recorder for authenticity, she said with a smirk. I didn't smile. As soon as we stepped inside, the temperature dropped. It was almost theatrical. The air lost all warmth, like the HVAC had died decades ago. The second floor groaned above us. "It always sound like this?" she asked, half laughing. I didn't answer. We made our way up the grand staircase, the carpet stiff with dust, until we reached the 3rd floor. The lights flickered once, just like last time. Mara raised an eyebrow, camera already rolling. "Convenient," she muttered. "Cliché haunted house nonsense." But I kept walking. I found the shelf just like before, 1893 to 1905, tilted slightly, undisturbed. "This is it?" I whispered, knocking 3 times on the thick oak. The sound echoed unnaturally, like the wood was hollow or led into something deeper. Nothing happened at first. Then the breeze. Then the creaking. The shelf groaned again, protesting as it slid open just enough to reveal the black slit behind it. Mara's breath hitched. "Okay," she said, not mocking anymore. "That's not normal." I squeezed in first, my flashlight barely illuminating the sloped corridor. "Come on," I said, more to myself than her. "We don't have much time." We descended slowly, our shoes scraping against concrete, our shadows stretching too long behind us. It smelled like mildew, old paper, and something else. Rust? Blood? Maybe both. At the bottom, the room looked exactly as I remembered it. The warped table with clippings, the rusted filing cabinets, the flickering bulb above. But something had changed. The timeline. It was longer. A new name had been added after mine. 2026 Mara Whitlock. She froze behind me when she saw it. "What the hell is this?" she asked, the camera shaking in her hand. "Is this some kind of sick prank? Did you do this?" "No," I said, my voice hollow. "I swear to God, it wasn't there before." She stepped closer to the wall, studying the handwriting. "This is the same red ink as the photo. How did you—" but she cut herself off. Her eyes went wide. Jeremy, that's a picture of my apartment building. That's my window. I turned. A new photo had been pinned beneath her name. Her face, her silhouette, backlit in her dorm window. Taken from the trees. Taken without her knowing. We both backed away instinctively. I'm done, she said, spinning toward the tunnel. I'm not doing this. This is too far. You need help. But the passage behind us was gone. The entrance had sealed, the wall smooth and unbroken. I ran to it, pounded on the concrete, but it didn't even echo. No seam, no door, just silence. Mara was screaming at me, threatening to call the cops, but her voice sounded like it was underwater. I turned back to the table, scanning the clippings again, looking for anything I'd missed before, and then I saw it. At the bottom of one yellowed article was a symbol, half obscured by a tack. I peeled it free and stared at the mark. An eye with 3 vertical slashes through the pupil. Something primal in me recoiled. I'd seen that symbol before, carved into the desk I used on the 3rd floor, etched faintly on the inside of the library's front door, even scribbled in the margins of one of my old textbooks. I thought it was just graffiti, a student thing, but now I realized it was older, and everywhere. A quick scan of the rest of the articles showed it repeated again and again. Carved into walls near crime scenes, found drawn in blood, burned into photographs. What is this? Mara whispered. Her fear now mingled with something else, awe. That's when we heard it. A scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like nails dragging across stone. It came from the far corner of the room, behind one of the filing cabinets. Mara raised her camera instinctively, stepping back as I crept closer to the sound. I grabbed the edge of the cabinet and yanked, and behind it, hidden in shadow, was another door. Not like the others. This one was made of iron, covered in the same symbol, the eye, dozens of them, layered atop one another. There was no handle, just a keyhole wide and jagged. We're not opening that, Mara said. We are not opening that. But the scraping stopped, replaced by whispering. A dozen voices, maybe more, speaking at once. They weren't behind the door. They were inside the room with us. And then the bulb overhead burst, plunging everything into darkness. I grabbed Mara and dropped to the floor. Her camera still had a tiny red light on it, blinking like a heartbeat. I heard her whispering my name, asking what was happening, and then I heard a click, the sound of a camera flash. And in that white-hot instant, just for a second, I saw them. Figures, dozens, pressed against the walls, faces pale and mouths sewn shut, eyes bleeding ink. They were watching, and smiling, and waiting. When the flash faded, they were gone. We scrambled to the door, any wall. But there was no way out. Not unless we understood what this room wanted. Not unless we figured out why we were next. Not unless we opened the iron door and faced what was behind it. The darkness didn't go away. It clung to us like mold, thick and soupy, more than just the absence of light. It had weight, pressure, and a kind of hunger that made every breath feel like we were inhaling rot. Mara's camera was the only source of illumination left. A faint blinking LED and the occasional flash she dared to trigger, though each burst revealed something worse than the last. Faces in corners, hands pressed to the ceiling, shapes that didn't retreat but froze, like they were posing. Every time the light returned, the room seemed slightly rearranged, like it was alive and reshuffling its bones. We couldn't stay here, not in this place, not in this breathing, twitching space that had rewritten the rules of reality. I turned back to the iron door, its jagged keyhole now leaking thin threads of black mist like cigarette smoke, curling upward and vanishing just inches above the surface. I had no key, but something in me, something ancient, instinctive, knew that we were meant to open it, that everything we'd seen was simply preamble. A test. Do you still have that weird metal thing from the shelf? Mara whispered, crouched low near the filing cabinets. You said you found it last time, right? My fingers instinctively went to my coat pocket. I'd forgotten about it, had shoved it away after that first visit, thinking it was just a rusted paperweight or some ceremonial trinket. Pulled it out. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and shaped like an old skeleton key with teeth so uneven it looked grown rather than forged. The head of the key was that same symbol, the eye with 3 slashes. The second I brought it near the iron door, the mist around the lock coiled tighter, retreating like it was afraid. The key slid in like it belonged. I paused with my hand on it. Mara was behind me, her breath loud and quick. "Wait!" she started, but I turned it. The door didn't creak. It didn't groan or resist. It simply unlatched with a clean metallic click, like something inside had been waiting for permission. A rush of air hit us, cold and chemical, laced with something biological, like formaldehyde and ancient death. The door didn't open outward. It sank into the wall like liquid, vanishing into the stone as if it had never existed. Behind it was a spiral staircase descending into complete blackness. "No," Mara said. "No, no, no, we are not going in there." But we were, because just above the entrance, etched into the stone in that same angry red, were the words, "The end of the line." And beneath it, "One must enter. One must stay." The meaning hit me immediately, but Mara hadn't put it together yet. I didn't tell her. Not yet. We started down, each step echoing wrong. Not in the way concrete echoes, but like it was mimicking our footsteps a beat behind. The air got warmer as we descended, and soon we found ourselves in a massive circular chamber, lit by hundreds of candles lining the walls. The floor was a mosaic, hundreds of tiny tiles forming that same unblinking symbol, now enormous and fractured. At the center of the room stood a stone altar covered in carvings. Bodies were carved into the sides, faceless, mouthless, writhing, all reaching toward the center where something was missing. Something once placed atop the altar had been removed, or escaped. On the far wall was a tapestry, ancient and rotting, showing the timeline again, but this one was thousands of years long. Civilizations we don't even have records for. Each had a year, a name, and a crude drawing of a face, then a red X over it. Generation after generation. Until now. Until us. "Jeremy," Mara said, pointing at the center. "Look." There were names carved into the altar itself, spiraling inward like a coiled serpent. At the center was mine, and just outside it, hers. "This isn't a list," I said, the words escaping without breath. "It's a countdown." Each pair of names represented a choice, a matching. One entered, one stayed, one died, one lived. This was never about the killer. There was no killer. The deaths, the disappearances, the suicides, they weren't murders in the traditional sense. They were sacrifices, bound by a system older than our campus, older than the country. A design etched into the architecture of Holloway Hall itself. A ritual that fed something, sustained something. "We're supposed to choose," Mara whispered. "A trade, like some ancient lottery." "No," I said, "not choose. We're supposed to understand, to accept." The air around us thickened, the candles flaring higher. Something in the walls started pulsing, like a massive heartbeat thudding through the stone. And then a voice, or many voices, filled the chamber. Not in any language we knew, but one we somehow understood anyway. A language that clawed at the base of our spines. "The line is broken," it said. "The names outrun the blood. The door has been opened too early. The toll must be paid." Mara collapsed to her knees, hands to her ears, screaming. Blood ran from her nose. I felt my mind slipping, like gravity was bending sideways, like time had reversed and I was both a child and an old man all at once. The symbols on the altar glowed, and from the far corner of the room, something began to emerge. It was not human. It was not animal. It was not meant for this world. A shape of limbs that twisted wrong, headless but still somehow watching, dozens of hands crawling along the floor, each one dragging a photograph. My photograph, Mara's, the victims, all of them, some fresh, some crumbling with age, stopped before us. The hands reached out, offering one of the photos to each of us. Mine to me, Mara's to her. The voice returned, now a chorus. "One must give, one must stay. The line demands balance." And then I knew. It didn't want us both dead. It just wanted one, a reset, a repair. But if neither of us chose, if we both refused, the balance would tip too far. And then everyone would pay. The room would no longer take one name a year. It would take dozens, hundreds, everyone tied to the line. Everyone descended from the original names carved into the stone. This was legacy. This was blood inheritance. This was the cost of knowing. "It's me," I whispered. "It's always been me." I stood and stepped toward the altar. Mara grabbed my arm, tears in her eyes. "No, no, you can't. We'll find another way." But there was no other way. The hand was already reaching for me. The moment my foot touched the edge of the mosaic, the chamber began to hum, and I saw it, all of it. A vision seared into my skull. Generations of sacrifices, of doors opened, of minds broken in service to something deep beneath the earth, something ancient and starved, slumbering beneath this campus for centuries. And in that flash, I understood why the room had opened for me, why the timeline had ended with my name. I wasn't just another victim. I was a continuation, a bloodline, a descendant of the very architect who built the chamber. The ritual needed me, my death, or worse, my containment. One must stay. The voice was louder now, final. And then, impossibly, another voice, a second option. "I'll do it," Mara said, quiet but clear. I turned to stop her, but the room reacted instantly. The altar began to close in, stone arms reaching, ready to claim its offering. The choice had been made, but it hadn't accepted her. The hands retracted, the light dimmed, and in the silence that followed, a single line appeared in blood across the altar's top, the wrong name. That's when we realized the ritual wasn't about nobility or self-sacrifice. It was about blood, about legacy, about debt, and only I carried it. I didn't move, couldn't. The phrase, "the wrong name," shimmered on the altar's surface like wet ink on old parchment. And the second it appeared, something in the room shifted, like the foundation of the earth had turned its attention toward us. The temperature dropped so violently that our breath became visible, coiling upward in frantic clouds as if trying to flee before we could. Mara staggered backward, muttering wrong name, under her breath like a mantra, trying to make sense of what just happened. I wasn't much better. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. The altar was still glowing faintly beneath my name. It was waiting, no, demanding. But before I could respond, the walls around us began to bleed. Thin streams of black ichor poured from cracks in the stone, winding like veins, converging at the base of the altar. The substance didn't drip. It moved, crawling, reaching, searching. The thing in the corner, the impossible shifting mass of limbs, began to recede into the shadows, dragging the photos with it, its job done. It wasn't the god. It was the servant, the collector, the scribe. And now that we had failed to give what was owed, the thing we had disturbed was beginning to stir. A thunderous beat rolled through the chamber, slow and steady. Not a sound, but a feeling, a vibration in the sternum. A heartbeat. It was alive. Somewhere beneath us, whatever had been resting for generations was waking up. Mara clutched her head and screamed. Blood poured from her ears. "It's in my mind," she sobbed. "It's writing something in my mind." I knelt beside her, helpless, watching as her eyes rolled back. Something was trying to replace her thoughts, overwrite her like a chalkboard being scrubbed clean and scribbled on again with red ink. She collapsed in a heap, still breathing but twitching. I turned back to the altar. "Take me," I whispered. "God damn it, I'm the one. Take me." But nothing happened. The altar remained dormant, as if it no longer trusted me. I wasn't offering myself out of duty anymore. I was offering myself out of fear. That wasn't what it wanted. It wanted something willing. I staggered back toward the spiral staircase, dragging Mara's body behind me, praying the way out hadn't vanished. My mind reeled. What the hell had we uncovered? Some ancient cult? A demonic cycle? A breach in the natural order? No theory made it better. I didn't even believe in the supernatural before this. I was a logic guy, rational, skeptical. But the thing that had brushed against the edge of my mind down there, the thing that had marked me, it wasn't folklore. It was real, and it was waiting. I made it back to the corridor, still carrying Mara, my fingers numb from gripping her too long. When we reached the surface of the hidden room, the passage opened behind the shelf again like it was spitting us out. The library was different now. It wasn't just abandoned, it was rotting. The walls were cracked. The lights flickered faster, more violently. The smell was unbearable, like something had died in every vent at once. I laid Mara gently on the ground beside one of the study carrels, propping her against the wall. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "He's still writing," she whispered, drool leaking from her lips. "He's writing me out. He's writing me out of myself." I checked my phone, no signal, no time. The screen was just a red eye now, pulsing with each vibration. I dropped it. Something in the walls let out a low moan. The wood panels swelled outward, like something was pushing from the other side. I sprinted to the front entrance. Locked. Every door was chained from the inside with iron bolts I'd never seen before. The windows were black. Not dark, black, as in covered in something thick and pulsing. I tried to break one with a chair. The chair bounced back like I'd hit concrete. I turned to the desk where the librarian had once sat. She was still there, but she wasn't breathing. Her face was frozen in a grin, eyes stitched shut, mouth agape with paper stuffed down her throat. Her fingers were tapping something into the keyboard, even though the monitor was off. Tap, tap, tap. I leaned over the desk and saw what she'd been typing. A document filled with names. All of them names I'd seen on the timeline. And mine was the final entry. Below it, one final line blinked. Sacrifice incomplete. Payment overdue. Then the monitor turned on by itself, flickering to life with a live camera feed. The hidden room, the altar, it was glowing again, and now there were 3 names etched into the stone. Mine, Mara's, and a third, one I didn't recognize. Edwin Callister, the architect, the one who built all this, the one who started the line. I stared at the name and something clicked. This wasn't just about bloodlines. This was about guilt, about consequence. I thought I was just unlucky, a descendant cursed by accident. But this was penance. My ancestor had made a deal, had built the chamber as a prison, a vessel, a vault for whatever lived below. And the cost was blood. Every few decades at first, then more frequently. The price kept rising. And now the vault was breaking. The entity wasn't content with one name per year anymore. It wanted everyone. It wanted out. I ran back to Mara. She was sitting up now, her head tilted at a sickening angle. "He's awake," she whispered, giggling. "He's writing your ending now." I slapped her, not out of cruelty, out of desperation. She blinked, slowly, and her voice came back to her. "He's in the walls," she said. "He's in the ink." I helped her to her feet, and we staggered together toward the 3rd floor again. The only option left was to finish what had started, to seal the door, to pay the toll, or everything would burn. As we approached the cursed shelf again, I noticed the books were gone. Every single one. The hallway behind it stretched wide open now like a mouth. No more barrier. The room wanted us back. And when we stepped inside, the timeline had changed. There were no more names. Just one phrase, carved into the wall itself in 100 different scripts, languages, alphabets. Some I recognized, Latin, Greek, English. Some I didn't, but I knew what it said. The line is dead. The vault is open. Flesh is the new ink. And then the room breathed, not metaphorically. The walls expanded and contracted like lungs. The air tasted like meat, and Mara dropped to her knees and vomited blood. "You have to go," she said. "It only wants you. You're the crack in the seal. If you die, maybe it can't pass through." "You'll die too," I said. "If I go alone, it'll kill you anyway." She smiled, teeth pink. "I think it already has." And then she did something I'll never forget. She grabbed the altar key from my pocket and jammed it into her own chest, piercing her sternum, blood spraying onto the mosaic. The The moment the blood touched the stone, everything changed. The walls screamed, the mosaic glowed, the photos ignited into flame, and something began climbing from the altar. A hand first, then a limb made of smoke and meat and bone. Something ancient and hungry. I screamed and reached for Mara, but she pushed me away. "Run," she said. "Seal it. Seal it with my name." The altar accepted her sacrifice. Her name glowed once, then twice, then vanished from the stone, consumed. Mine remained, but only one name could stay, and the room had made its choice. I ran. I didn't look back. The library collapsed behind me as I exited through the passage that somehow reopened just long enough to spit me out into the cold night. Sirens in the distance, campus lights flickering. The building groaned as if it were dying, but it didn't fall. It stood, waiting, watching. The line might have been sealed for now, but something had changed. The photos were still burning in my mind. The whispers hadn't stopped, and every mirror I looked into after that night showed me with blood under my fingernails, even when I hadn't touched a thing. The timeline was gone, but the debt wasn't, and I know, deep in the marrow of my bones, that it's not over. The thing below isn't patient. It isn't satisfied. It just sleeps, and one day someone else will find the room. And when they do, my name will be there again, at the end of the line. The worst part wasn't the screams or the blood or even the thing clawing its way out of the altar. It was what came after. The silence. The return to normal. I expected the library to be in ruins when I ran outside that night. Smoke curling from shattered windows, chunks of stone cracked and bleeding, alarms blaring and fire crews swarming in to respond to whatever ungodly phenomenon I had just escaped. But there was nothing. Just quiet, calm. I turned back toward Holloway Hall and found it standing just as it always had, untouched, unmoving, its stained glass windows glowing faintly in the moonlight. The front doors were locked again. No sign of damage. No sign anyone had ever been inside. And Mara, she was just gone, as if she'd never existed. I tried calling her number. Disconnected. I checked her dorm. Empty. Her name was wiped from the student directory. Our criminology professor said there was no such person on the roster. When I asked classmates about her, they stared blankly or claimed to vaguely recall someone like her. But no one could remember her name. No one remembered her face. The only person who seemed remotely aware was Dr. Rhodes, the head of the university archives, an old man who hadn't left his office in years. I found him 3 days later, buried under stacks of yellowed microfilm and file boxes. His eyes were sunken, red-rimmed, and when I asked him about Edwin Callister or the hidden room, he froze. "That part of the building doesn't exist," he said without blinking. "It was sealed during renovations in 1932. Bricked up, floor plans changed, access removed." I showed him a photo I'd taken of the symbol, the eye with 3 slashes, etched into the altar. His hand trembled. He stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out a much older version of the same symbol. This one drawn in ink on parchment so brittle it flaked in my hands. "This is the imprimatur," he whispered. "The mark of witness. It's older than this land. It shows up in ruins across Europe. Early Mesopotamian sites, even buried beneath Mesoamerican temples. It's a seal, a warning, a lock, and every time it appears, a generation disappears." I asked what it meant that it was in our library. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "You shouldn't be here anymore." He was right. I should have left, dropped out, moved across the country, changed my name, but I didn't. Something about the ritual had infected me. I was tethered to it, bound by blood and history and knowledge. Knowledge was the real curse. Once you knew, once you'd seen what was behind the veil, the room could find you again no matter where you went. I tried anyway. I packed everything I owned into a beat-up Civic and drove west for 3 days without stopping, sleeping in rest stops and gas stations, chewing caffeine pills until my teeth ached. But on the 4th day, in a motel outside Albuquerque, I saw the symbol again, scratched into the bathroom mirror, faint and fresh. I wiped it away. I checked out early. That night, I dreamed of Mara. She was standing in the altar room, But it wasn't crumbling anymore. It was alive. The stones pulsed like veins. The walls bled freely. Her mouth was sewn shut, but her eyes begged me to do something, to finish what she started. I woke up with blood under my nails and the smell of candle wax in my nostrils. My pillowcase had the faint outline of a handprint scorched into the fabric. I went to the front desk and asked the clerk if anyone had seen someone entering my room. The clerk was gone. In his place stood a man with no eyebrows, pale as milk, and he slid a note across the counter to me without speaking. The note read, "You still haven't paid." I kept running. Oregon, Montana, Canada. Nothing helped. Every few weeks, I'd find something. A slip of paper in my coat pocket with the timeline redrawn in new ink, now counting upward instead of downward. A whisper on the other end of a disconnected phone line. A child humming the chant I'd heard in the altar room. It didn't stop. And then came the deaths. A librarian in Seattle found hanged in the archive basement. A graduate student vanished from a closed campus library in Nova Scotia. A priest burned alive in his study, surrounded by copies of 15th century demonology texts. All in universities, all linked by location and date, all matching the pattern. I was watching it start again. Only this time it wasn't one name a year. It was accelerating. 2, then 3, then 7. And always, in the margins of the crime reports, was a crude sketch of the eye. I started compiling it all. Private blog, password protected, hidden behind 10 layers of encryption. I didn't care if anyone believed me. I just needed a record, a warning, a map, because the thing I realized, the thing no one wanted to hear, was that the altar hadn't been built once. It had been built many times, across continents, under schools, in churches, hidden in archives and vaults. The Holloway Hall chamber was just my altar, but there were others. I hacked into university servers. I traced architectural records, the same dimensions, the same materials, always slightly altered to match the culture. A blood basin in Chile, a stone circle in Romania, a sealed crypt in Thailand, but the same function, the same demand, knowledge for sacrifice, insight for blood. One day I woke up in a public library in Nebraska. I had no memory of how I got there. A stack of books sat beside me, all open to chapters on ancient rituals, death cults, and alternate planes of consciousness. My notebook was full of drawings I didn't remember making, the altar, the symbol, the spiral timeline now reaching into the sky, and written in block letters on the back page. The line never ends. It just learns to bend. I checked my email and saw a message from a sender with no address. The subject line said, "We know." The body of the message was a live photo. Me sitting in the library the second before I opened the email. I closed the laptop and left. I spent the next month off-grid, living in a cabin I built from scratch with no electricity or plumbing. I buried all electronics. I drank rainwater and wrote my thoughts on scraps of bark. But even there, even in the woods with no mirrors, no screens, no lights, the altar found me. I heard it in the wind, in the trees groaning at night, in the way the shadows never quite matched my movements. One night, I woke up to find a symbol burned into the inside of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, I saw it. Every time I looked away, it lingered. I screamed until my throat tore, and then I passed out. When I woke up, the altar was in front of me. Not literally, but drawn in the dirt, perfect in proportion. The timeline spiraled outward again. My name was still at the end, but this time it wasn't alone. Next to it was another, one I didn't recognize. Yours. That's why I'm writing this. Not as a confession, not even as a warning, but as a bridge. The ritual changed when I walked away. It adapted. It evolved. It doesn't wait for someone to find the room anymore. It finds them through the story, through the telling, through you. The altar is an idea now, one that spreads when it's read, seen, heard. And every time someone consumes the story, the line shifts, grows, prepares. I see you now, sitting there, reading this. I know your breath caught at a certain moment. I know you felt something watching you behind your screen. That wasn't your imagination. That was the altar checking the name, measuring the fit, deciding. I didn't escape. I only delayed. But you've just started. Welcome to the line. The vault is open. The seal is memory. The sacrifice is attention. Look behind you. There's something that happens when your reality fractures. Not all at once, not cleanly like a broken bone, but in hairline splinters, quiet cracks spidering beneath the surface until the world you knew becomes a thin crust hiding something beneath it that writhes and pulses and waits to be noticed. That's what my life became after the altar, after Mara, after the timeline. I stopped sleeping, not because I was afraid of what I'd dream, but because I knew the dreams weren't mine anymore. I'd see places I'd never been, people I didn't know whispering in tongues too old for language. I'd wake up with Latin carved into my arms in perfect lines. Non meminit ergo vivit. He does not remember, therefore he lives. At first, I thought I was doing it to myself. I set up cameras, tied my wrists, slept with gloves. But the messages kept appearing. One night, I woke up to find a second pillow beside mine, still indented, still warm. The cameras showed nothing, just static from 2:33 a.m. to 3:06 a.m., exactly 33 minutes. That number kept showing up, in the corners of receipts, in timestamps, in digital clocks that flickered to life even when unplugged. The number of names per timeline cycle, 33, always 33. I dug deeper, found a pattern of disappearances going back centuries, all tied to academic institutions. Not just the original altar sites I'd researched, but colleges, libraries, museums, any place that stored knowledge, that preserved it. All had records of vanished students, missing professors, archival incidents. It was never publicized, never investigated, just paper trails buried in microfiche, letters marked confidential, and dead-end leads that all ended in locked doors and files blacked out by agencies that didn't technically exist. I traced one case to a university in Prague, where a doctoral student had gone missing in 1986. Her last known location? A sealed reading room rumored to house a self-writing book. Her thesis advisor filed a report claiming she'd opened a vault under the philosophy wing and stepped into the ink itself. The report was later classified as delusional. The professor was institutionalized. He died writing the same symbol over and over on the padded walls of his cell, the eye with 3 slashes. Another incident at a seminary in Italy in 1913. 13 brothers committed a ritual starvation over 33 days. Their final journal entries describing voices in the stonework. Their final words, "We were never meant to know this much." That line haunted me, because that was the core of it, wasn't it? The real horror wasn't a monster or a demon or some ancient god. It was knowledge, forbidden, leaking, alive in the spaces where we store what we shouldn't touch. Knowledge like a virus, no worse, like a parasite. I began to notice people following me. Not people, really, just figures, reflections that didn't move with me, faces that weren't in crowds a moment ago. Once, I caught a man staring at me from the inside of a freezer door at a gas station. When I spun around, the door was empty. But when I looked back, the frost on the glass had begun to form the spiral, the timeline. Then came the messages. Not just emails or texts, but in newspapers I picked up at diners. Ads on billboards that glitched mid-message to display coordinates or dates tied to the altar. Graffiti on train cars. Chalk messages on sidewalks. My name kept appearing. Not Jeremy. Not even Jeremy Knox. Just my face. Printed, drawn, etched into wood. Once I found it scratched into a turtle's shell on a hiking trail in Utah. Another time it was carved into the sand on a beach I'd never been to, but saw in a stranger's Instagram story. It got worse. People I'd never met began recognizing me. "Aren't you the one from the article?" they'd ask. "Didn't you survive that fire in the East Wing? I read about you in a thread. Some guy who saw a room that wasn't there?" I never told anyone. I never posted anything public. Not one word. The story was leaking. I found a Reddit post detailing everything, word for word, right down to the phrase, "The vault is open." The account that posted it had no history. The IP was traced to my own router. I hadn't logged in weeks, but the post timestamp matched one of my blackout episodes. It got 23 upvotes. Then it was deleted, but the damage was done. I started getting DMs, emails, voicemails, all saying the same thing. I saw the room too. They came from all over South Korea, Norway, Wisconsin, Brazil. All different people, all different timelines, all with the same altar, and each of them was slowly losing their mind. One girl said her name kept changing in official records. A boy claimed his birth certificate rewrote itself weekly. Another said the people around him forgot he existed if he left their line of sight. One guy just texted me a photo of his own severed hand. No explanation, no follow-up. I tried ignoring them. I shut everything off, burned my phone, bought a flip, started sleeping in crowded places, thinking maybe if I stayed among people, I could stay anchored. But the story was no longer bound to me. I had become a vector, and the more people learned, the more the line bent. And when the line bends too far, it snaps. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat and realized I'd stopped dreaming entirely. That should have been a relief. It wasn't, because in place of dreams, there were memories I didn't own. Memories of being a child in a room lit only by candles. Memories of speaking to a figure made of mirrors. Memories of building the altar with bare hands while others wept nearby. Every night I lived new lives, different people, different hosts, and every morning I felt less like myself. My face looked wrong in the mirror. My voice had a slight echo. One day I opened my mouth and Mara's voice came out. That was the worst day. I tried ending it. Once. Just once. Not dramatically. Just silence. A long walk into the snow without coat or phone or wallet. I sat down, waited, welcomed the cold. But when I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed, and 4 in my arm, a priest sitting beside me. God gave you back, he said. That means you still owe something. When I asked how I'd gotten there, he just smiled and walked away. The 4 bag was filled with ink. I swear to God, ink. Thick, dark red-black. I pulled it out and left that place without saying a word. I don't know what's keeping me alive. I don't know if I am alive anymore. I just know that I'm writing this now, and if you're reading it, then you've been chosen too. Because the altar doesn't need rooms anymore. It doesn't need stone or candles or tunnels. The altar is the story. And every time you read a word, every time you picture the symbol, the timeline, the name at the end, you're laying another tile in the spiral. You're building the altar again. You're giving it form. And the altar remembers. It remembers every mind it touches, every page it uses, every set of eyes. You think you're safe? You're not. Check your dreams tonight. Count the names. Watch the clocks. If you see 33, it's already started. If you see my face, run. Don't try to help. Don't try to understand. Just burn this. Delete this. But you won't. No one ever does. You'll think it's fiction. You'll show a friend. You'll laugh about it on some podcast. And the altar will feed. Because now the story's in you. And soon, there'll be a new name on the wall. A new end to the line. And I think you already know whose name it'll be. Time doesn't move right anymore. It bends, twists, recoils like a slug touched by salt whenever I try to measure it. I used to think I could track the days by marking tallies on my walls, keeping a count of sunrises, logging the date in notebooks, but the sunrises began to repeat. Some mornings I'd wake up and it would be July 3rd again, for the 6th time in a row, and I knew because the radio always played the same Bowie song and the birds always flew left across the sky in the same jagged V. Then it skipped, straight to July 12th, a whole week lost. I checked my reflection and there were faint bruises on my ribs, fingerprints in sets of 3, as if something had held me while I slept. Sometimes I catch glimpses of people I know are dead, not in the corners of my vision, but in the middle, right in front of me, sitting on the train or walking out of gas stations. Mara was the first. She stood outside a diner in Nevada. Same jacket she'd been wearing the night she drove that altar key into her chest. I slammed the brakes, nearly crashed into a tree. When I got out, she was gone. But where she'd been standing, there was a circle of ash, perfectly round. The the same size as the altar basin. That's when I realized I hadn't escaped the altar. I had become its vessel, a traveling echo, a breach through which it could see. My body was no longer just mine. It was a continuation of a ritual that had evolved beyond space and matter. It no longer needed to be hidden in stone chambers or under candlelight. It lived in signal, in rhythm, in pattern. I stopped staying in one place. Each time I did, bad things happened. Rooms would warp. People would disappear. The power would flicker in sequence. One long, three short, too long again. A signal that matched the pulse I'd seen beating through the altar wall back in Holloway. I thought maybe I could stay in constant motion and outrun it. I was wrong. It began following me digitally. I threw out my old phone, used burner numbers. But even then, I'd get voicemails from blocked numbers, just the sound of chalk scraping stone, or heavy breathing layered over children reciting prime numbers. I checked into a library one night. Yes, I was that stupid, hoping to use their computers to search ancient archives. The moment I logged in, the screen froze and began auto-typing. Welcome back to the stacks. A new name has been added. Then it printed coordinates, longitude and latitude, to a location in the Peruvian Andes. When I traced it, it matched the ruins of an undocumented structure recently unearthed by heavy flooding. A group of hikers had vanished there 3 weeks before. Their drone footage was leaked anonymously online. The last frame of the video showed them entering a cavern etched with the eye and spiral. I paused the frame. One of the stones at the entrance had my name carved into it. Not Jeremy Knox. Not initials. Just witness. That's what I was now. That's what we all are once we've seen the room. The altar takes the name when you're chosen. But if you survive, it gives you a new one. One not spoken, just felt. A weight, a tether. It's not a role. It's a curse. And worse, there's more of us now. I found forums on the dark web, locked behind sigil-based logins and glyphic puzzles you had to see rather than solve. They called themselves the Ink-Blooded. Most were raving mad. Some posted coordinates to their own hidden altars. Some begged for others to take their place. One claimed to be the last true descendant of Edwin Callister and said he'd found the first altar, the original, older than Holloway, older than language, buried beneath a mountain in a part of Siberia that hadn't thawed in millennia. He said it whispered in pre-words, pulses of raw information that weren't thoughts or sound, just intent. His final post was a live video stream of a stone cavern slowly swallowing itself while his voice recited the timeline backward. No one's heard from him since. Then came the sickness. Not physical, metaphysical. The world began to glitch. Street signs rearranged their letters when I wasn't looking. People's shadows moved a second too late. I met a woman who said her daughter had begun drawing spirals in her sleep. On the walls, the furniture, her own skin. One day the daughter spoke in a dead language, and a voice that wasn't hers said, "She has been counted." They fled, changed their names, burned their house. It didn't help. I get messages from people like this all the time now. People who read the story. People who heard it whispered in a bar, passed down like campfire gossip. And every time someone hears it, the spiral deepens. The altar tightens its coil. That's how it works. That's how it spreads. Not through belief, through exposure, through attention. And in that realization, I saw the truth. The altars were never about sacrifice. Not exactly. They were containment. Locks. Each ritual wasn't feeding a god, it was binding it, slowing its emergence. The price was blood because blood is memory. Blood is history, and we were the seal. Every person who died in those rooms, every name etched into stone, wasn't a victim. They were keepers. But we failed. We stopped believing. We stopped recording. We turned stories into entertainment, rituals into fiction, and now the seals have weakened. The entity, the thing beneath, the ink god, the author of ends, it's rising. And we can feel it because the cracks are no longer hidden. You've felt them, haven't you? The glitch when a song skips for no reason. The way your phone vibrates with no notification. The dreams of a room you've never been in, full of candles, with your name floating on the ceiling like smoke. That's it. That's how it tags you. You don't need to touch the stone. Just read the name. Picture the symbol. Think about the timeline. It enters you through the act of attention. That's the true cost of knowledge. Not madness, not death, infection, because now you're part of it. You've read this far. You've felt that cold pressure behind your eyes. You're scanning your walls, wondering if that sound you just heard was in your house or in your head. Good. That means it worked. That means the altar has you. You'll deny it at first. All of us do. You'll laugh, maybe share this with a friend. You'll mock it, forget about it. But it won't forget you, because the next time you close your eyes and dream of a room you don't recognize, the next time your hand writes something in the margins of your notebook that you don't remember thinking, it'll be back. The symbol, the names, the spiral, and yours will be at the end. We're not at the finish. We never were. The line doesn't end. It evolves. The original altars are waking. They're calling to each other, syncing. The Holloway timeline was just one chapter. The full book is opening, and it has no author. It writes itself in blood, in silence, in readers, and the final name will belong to the last witness. Not the first, not the middle, the final. Because when that name is carved, when the last reader has seen too much and the cycle completes, the altar will become whole. The vault will open, and the God beneath the spiral will step through. I thought there'd be a moment when I knew it was the end. A singular rupture, a loud crack in reality. Maybe the sky opening like wet paper and the stars blinking out one by one as the thing behind the veil stepped through. But that's not how it happened. The end didn't come with a bang or a scream or the apocalypse everyone pictures in fire and ash and trumpets. It came in correction, in subtle edits. The kind you don't notice until too many have stacked and the world you knew is irreparably off by just a hair. Just enough that everything feels wrong, and wrong is now the new natural. I began noticing the signs when my reflection started showing things I hadn't done yet. I'd walk by a mirror and catch myself blinking late or mouthing words I hadn't said. Once, I watched my reflection sit down before I did. Once, it looked afraid of me. I threw out the mirrors. Didn't help. The reflections showed up in glass, in puddles, in car windows, in people's eyes. I'd look at strangers, and sometimes I'd see myself looking back. I wasn't Jeremy anymore, not in the way a name belongs to a person. I was becoming an idea, and the altar, the spiral, the timeline, they were rewriting me from the inside. I stopped dreaming in language. Now my sleep was filled with architecture. Ancient rooms, corridors without doors, stairs that led downward in impossible loops, and walls covered in script I now understood without translation. Not read, understood. It wasn't Latin, not Hebrew or Enochian or any of the dead tongues it mimicked. It was older, deeper. I saw glyphs that weren't meant to be seen, shapes that nested within themselves, concepts you weren't supposed to be aware of without breaking. One night, I dreamed of standing at the center of a spiral so vast the stars were carved into its grooves, and a voice, deep, moist, wordless, said, "Write the last name." I woke up with my hands stained red. I'd carved a name into the drywall of my motel room. Not mine, not Mara's. It was your name, your real name, the one you hear in your dreams but forget when you wake up. The one the altar wants, because this was never about me. I see that now. I was the breach, the gap in the seal, the misstep that let the blood run too long without order. And now it's correcting that. And it's doing it by jumping timelines, threads, universes, maybe. I'm not sure. All I know is the timeline no longer moves in a single spiral. It branches, forks, echoes, and the altar exists in all of them. Some of them I've visited. Others I've only seen glimpses of in glass or sleep or screams. In one, the altar is metal, a massive engine beneath a dead sun. In another, it's a child's toy box, and the sacrifice is innocence instead of blood. In one, there are no humans left, just echoes, just ink seeping upward from 1,000 cracked vaults under a black ocean. I watched a version of myself in one of them. Bald, mouth sewn shut, kneeling in a stone room with 33 others, all facing the spiral, all muttering in unison as their names evaporated from existence. No death, no scream, just erasure, a mercy maybe. That's when I realized the timeline isn't just a record of deaths. It's a map. Each name marks a tethered identity, a version of a witness, a signal flare to the altar, like a beacon saying, "This one knows." And the moment a name is added, that version begins to rot. The person begins to drift. Memory goes, time skips, reality gets looser. And when the final name is added, when the last witness is chosen, the altar stops being an altar and becomes a door. I don't know how close we are, but I know my name is no longer last. The spiral has expanded, and the entity that once fed quietly beneath Holloway now watches through all the altars. It's in the spaces between data. It's in the code of unread books, the forgotten corners of basements, the pauses between thoughts where your mind goes still for a second and you feel like something's standing behind you, just waiting for you to blink. I tested this theory. I went back to Holloway. I know, stupid. The building should have been condemned, but it wasn't. In fact, it was pristine, renovated. There were students again, a librarian, light jazz playing in the lobby. Everything normal, too normal. I asked about the back archives. They didn't exist, according to the receptionist. No locked door, no third-floor shelf. I walked the same path anyway, counted the paces, turned where I remembered, and there it was, the shelf, now full of books, ordinary titles. But when I pulled the central book, the wall behind melted. Not literally, but like a hologram dissipating. The hallway was still there, still breathing, still waiting, and this time it was brighter, as if it knew I was coming, as if it had prepared the room. I walked in. The altar was gone. In its place was a mirror, perfect circle 7 feet tall, reflecting not me, but the timeline itself now wrapped into a perfect loop. Names spun around its edge like constellations. Hundreds, thousands. I saw faces flicker with each rotation. Some I knew, most I didn't. And then, at the very center of the mirror, written in that impossible tongue, was the phrase I'd heard since the beginning: "Flesh is the new ink." I touched it. Everything vanished. And when I woke up, the world had changed. No, it had corrected. The altar no longer hides in rooms. It's in your feed, your memories, your syntax. It writes through stories, and each retelling gives it weight. Each reader adds a brick to the new vault. And soon, maybe already, the final vault won't be a place. It'll be a person. Someone who can carry the whole spiral inside them. Someone who knows all the names, who has seen every altar, read every glyph. Someone like me, or someone like you. I can feel it now, burrowing deeper, rewriting me line by line. I am becoming story, a narrative avatar, a mouthpiece, a door. And when the transformation finishes, there won't be any Jeremy Knox left. Just the witness, the final, the penultimate name before the threshold opens. I write this last message from nowhere, no time, no location. I don't exist on maps anymore. GPS doesn't pick me up. No bank account, no ID. Even my own fingerprints came back blank when I was arrested last month for trespassing in a condemned church in Missouri, an altar site I recognized by the spiral carved into every single pew. The officer said, "You're a ghost." I didn't correct him. I can't eat anymore. I can't sleep. My blood is thick like ink. My shadow flickers like a bad recording. People cry when they look at me too long. And in mirrors, I no longer see a man. I see the spiral. I see the door. And it's almost open. When the final name is spoken aloud, not thought, not read, but spoken, the last altar will awaken. And the author of ends will step through. Not into the world. Into the reader. Into you. So I beg you, please burn this. Delete it. Never say your real name out loud again. And never, never finish the sentence scratched into the wall of every hidden room. The altar is, no, I won't. I won't be the one. I won't speak it. I won't give it the last line. That's the only power I have left, to refuse the period at the end. To let the final sentence remain unwritten. Because if I speak it, if I finish the line, then the story becomes complete. And when the story is complete, it stops being fiction. And then, it begins. Story 2. I always grew up with this strange silence around my mother. Not absence, people mentioned her, but never directly, never with detail. It was like she'd been airbrushed out of my history, the shape of her still faintly visible but without color or edge. My dad told me she died when I was just under a year old. Accident, he'd always say. Sad and quick, nothing to dwell on. I never pushed. You don't really know how to challenge the people raising you when you're still figuring out the difference between a dream and a memory. I had one photograph of her, or rather of someone I was told was her, tucked into a dusty frame in the hallway. A woman in a brown coat, holding me awkwardly on her hip, looking just off camera like someone had called her name at the last second. She didn't look sad or happy. She looked distracted. That's the only word I can use now, looking back. Like part of her was already somewhere else. The photo always unsettled me, but I didn't know why. Maybe it was because it was the only one. No wedding shots, no maternity pictures, no goofy selfies, just one grainy Polaroid, stapled to the narrative like proof. I was raised by my dad, a quiet man with the kind of sadness that sat behind his eyes even when he smiled. He never remarried, never dated as far as I know. We moved around a lot, Virginia, then upstate New York, then Colorado, always small towns, always rental houses that felt temporary. I didn't mind. I thought maybe he just had wanderlust or couldn't stay in one place long after losing his wife. I never thought to question it. But when I turned 26, something shifted. I'd been living on my own in Chicago, working IT for a hospital and quietly accumulating student debt, when I got a voicemail that changed everything. It was from a man who identified himself as Detective Monroe, from a cold case unit in Indiana. "This is regarding your mother," he said. "I know this might be difficult, but I'd appreciate a call back. It's about something we recovered from a wooded area near Greystone Township. It's about her teeth." He said it exactly like that. I played the message 3 times before I called him back. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know why. Something about the tone of his voice, the pause, the discomfort, told me this wasn't routine. I called him that night, and he answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. "Mr. Harper?" he asked, and I nodded before realizing he couldn't see me. Yeah, this is Cole Harper." My mouth felt dry. He was quiet for a second, then said, "Thank you for calling me back. Listen, I know this is going to sound strange. We recovered a partial human jawbone in a forest preserve near Greystone. The bone itself isn't in great shape, maybe 30 years in the ground, but a few of the teeth are intact. We ran them through a forensic odontologist and matched them against some old dental records. They belonged to your mother." I blinked, unsure if I heard him correctly. "What?" I said. "I thought. My mother died in an accident." Another pause. "That's what the original death certificate said. But this, well, it complicates things. Your mother's remains weren't found at the time. No body, just personal effects. There was pressure to close the case quickly." "Wait, what kind of pressure?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. "Cole, your mother didn't die in a car crash. That story was created after the fact. What we found doesn't line up with that narrative at all." I asked what he meant, and he said he wasn't authorized to share all the details over the phone, but he encouraged me, urged me to come down in person. "There's more than just teeth," he said, "and I think you deserve to see it for yourself." Against every instinct in my body, I agreed. Something inside me had been coiled for years, waiting for a reason to unspool, and this was it. The day after, I took the train down to Indiana, rented a car, and drove toward Greystone, a town I'd never heard of but which, apparently, held the truth about my mother's disappearance. The further I got from the city, the more the land flattened out into dull gray fields and skeletal trees. The sky pressed low, thick with winter clouds, and the radio fuzzed out completely. I arrived in Greystone just before sunset. It wasn't really a town, not anymore, more like a cluster of broken buildings around a forgotten main street. Everything looked like it had been abandoned during some economic collapse no one bothered to fix. The police station was a squat cement block that smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. Inside, Detective Monroe was waiting for me. A man in his early 50s, with a tired posture and eyes that didn't flinch when they looked at you. He didn't smile when he shook my hand. "Let's talk in back," he said. The office he led me into was cluttered with boxes labeled with names and numbers in Sharpie. Unsolveds, I assumed. Cold cases. He gestured for me to sit, then handed me a manila folder. "This is what we recovered," he said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a black and white photo of a jawbone, broken, weathered, with several teeth still embedded. It looked wrong. Not just old, but unnatural. The molars were jagged in a way I hadn't seen before, like they had been filed to points. "These matched your mom's dental records?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "Most of them, yes. But here's the strange part." He flipped to another photo, this one of a symbol carved into the underside of the jaw. A circle with 3 intersecting lines. It looked almost like a biohazard sign, but off. "This wasn't from an animal," he said. "And we've seen this before on other bones. Same area, different victims." I stared at it, something stirring in the back of my mind, like static before a storm. He handed me another photo. It was the forest floor, a wide shot of the excavation site. Dozens of bones spread out in a spiral, not buried, arranged. "We believe this was a ritual site," he said. "We've recovered 7 different skeletons, all missing the same teeth, all marked with the same symbol. But your mother's is the oldest. She was the first." Couldn't breathe. I stared at the photos, at the spiral, and the smell of damp earth filled my nose even though we were nowhere near it. "Why now?" I asked. "Why is this just coming up?" Monroe hesitated, then said, "Because someone called in an anonymous tip last month. Said to check the dirt where the wind hums like teeth." That's exactly what they said. And when we followed the directions, we found this site. Almost like someone wanted it found. I looked up at him. "Do you think whoever did this is still out there?" "No," he said. "I think they're closer than that." And then he pulled out the final photo, the one that made my stomach turn over and my skin crawl like it remembered something I didn't. It was a photo of a tree, half rotted, with initials carved into the bark. "CH plus MH. That's me?" I whispered. "Your mother's name was Miriam," he said. "And the date carved below it? 1997. I did the math. I had just been born." "Cole," Monroe said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We think someone brought her back here after you were born. We think she was alive longer than the records say. And we think you might have been there. I don't remember leaving the station. I don't remember driving to the motel. All I remember is the weight, this thick, sticky weight, like something had wrapped around my memories and started pulling. That night I dreamed of teeth, not falling out, growing in. Dozens, hundreds, along the roof of my mouth, crawling up the back of my throat like they wanted to chew their way out. When I woke up, my jaw ached, and there was dirt under my fingernails. The motel door was unlocked, and on the bathroom mirror, written in something brown and flaking, was one word: remember. I didn't know what to make of that message on the mirror. Remember. It felt like a command, not a suggestion, and it clawed at the edges of my mind all day, gnawing at me with a strange, compulsive urgency. I kept replaying every moment of my childhood, every shadow, every fleeting oddity my dad might have missed or never mentioned, but nothing came into focus. Just a deep fog where my earliest memories should have been. Sleep became a battleground. Every night, the teeth came back, pressing, gnashing, filling my mouth until I could barely breathe. Sometimes, I would wake up in the dark, my hands covered in dirt, no recollection of where I'd been or what I'd done. I tried calling my dad. He didn't answer. When he finally picked up hours later, his voice was tight, brittle, and distant, like a man trying to hide a secret buried too deep to dig out. I asked about my mother, about the accident, about anything that could explain the call. He said, "Son, some things are better left buried." But I wasn't done. I went digging online in archives, in old newspapers no one had touched since the 90s. What I found was unsettling. A series of disappearances in Greystone Township from 1995 to 2002. Mostly women, all last seen near the woods where the jawbone was found. All officially unsolved. all quietly removed from public awareness by local police. Some cases marked closed without bodies or clear evidence. Some names cropped up repeatedly. Miriam Harper wasn't one of them. She was just gone from the record entirely, like someone had erased her. Then came the strange messages. Anonymous emails started flooding my inbox. No sender, no subject, just pictures of teeth arranged in cryptic patterns, scribbled notes about the mouth of the forest, and coordinates that led to places I'd never heard of. First, I thought it was a sick joke, but then I received a package, no return address, containing a rusted silver tooth, hollowed out and blackened with age. Inside, it was a tiny folded paper with the words, "She spoke through the teeth." Couldn't sleep that night. The weight of the tooth in my hand felt like a promise, a binding knot around my throat. The next day, I contacted Detective Monroe again, desperate for more. He seemed hesitant, guarded. He told me there was a file no one had touched for decades, a locked box labeled Harper Case. They'd found it in the archives but never processed it. He arranged for me to see it under supervision, but warned me, "This is where things get messy." The file was full of scribbled notes, photos, and faded letters. The handwriting was shaky but urgent, from a local coroner who'd suspected foul play in Miriam's accident. She wrote about strange wounds around the jawline, bite marks, and the teeth. The teeth don't belong. There were diagrams, pages stained with what looked like dried blood, and a horrifying report about a whispered confession from a man who claimed to have been involved in a ritual with Miriam. Monroe told me the confession was dismissed, the man institutionalized, and the report sealed. But the teeth, the symbol carved into the jawbone, the spiral arrangement of the bones, it all pointed to something darker, older, and more sinister than a simple disappearance. I began having nightmares that went beyond the teeth. I dreamed of a woman's mouth, impossibly wide, filled with jagged teeth sharp as razors, stretching into a cavernous void. A voice, whispering in a language I couldn't understand but somehow felt in my bones, told me she was waiting, trapped in the mouth of the forest, speaking through the teeth of the lost. Each dream ended with a face, pale, haunted, with hollow eyes that seemed to know me. I couldn't tell if it was my mother or something else wearing her skin. At work, I started losing time. Hours would disappear from my day, and I'd find myself staring at the wall, mouth dry, heart racing. A strange taste in my mouth, like metal or old blood. Emails I didn't send were in my outbox, cryptic and disjointed. Friends called, concerned. I pushed them away. I didn't want anyone to see me unraveling. One evening, my apartment door was scratched from the outside, deep gouges in the wood that looked like teeth marks. No note, no sign of forced entry, just the marks. I called Monroe again, panicked. He told me to come to Greystone immediately. When I arrived, he took me to the forest preserve where the bones had been found. The air was thick with decay, and the ground was soft, almost sponge-like. We walked to the spiral of bones, now cordoned off with police tape. Monroe pointed to the center. "This is where the jawbone was recovered, but there's more." He knelt, brushing dirt away to reveal a small, carved box. Ancient wood, sealed tight with a rusted clasp. Inside, wrapped in brittle cloth, was a small collection of teeth, arranged in a pattern I recognized immediately. The spiral symbol, the same one carved into the jawbone. Monroe told me, "We think these were used as a kind of voice box, like a way to trap a spirit." My mind reeled. How could teeth trap a spirit? How could this be connected to my mother? Then I noticed something in the box. A single tooth, larger than the others, shaped differently. It was my size, my molar. I felt my throat close. Monroe's face was pale. "Cole, there's more. We think your mother was part of something no one wants to admit. Something old. Something that feeds on the lost. We're looking into disappearances before Miriam too. There's a pattern. All around this forest, all tied to this symbol." That night, I left Greystone, but I knew I couldn't escape. My dreams were filled with that mouth, with the voice whispering, with teeth growing inside me, pressing, demanding. I looked in the mirror and saw a strange shadow behind my eyes, as if something was watching, waiting to speak through me. I'm writing this now, unsure what will happen next, but I know one thing: the cold case detective's call wasn't just about teeth. It was a warning, a message, and maybe, just maybe, it's a beginning. The days after I left Greystone turned into a blur of paranoia and fragmented memories, as though my mind was splintering like cracked glass, reflecting shards of something I couldn't fully comprehend yet. Every waking moment felt like I was walking through a fog, the edges of reality smudged, shifting, as though the world itself was breathing in and out in sync with some dark pulse beneath the surface. And the dreams, God, the dreams only grew worse, no longer confined to sleep but creeping into my waking hours, snippets of that terrible cavernous mouth, jagged teeth gnashing in the shadows, whispering a language without words that echoed in my bones and settled heavy in my throat, making me choke on silence. I stopped eating properly because the metallic taste of blood, or was it something else, lingered constantly in my mouth, a reminder that something was growing there, something alive and hungry, gnawing at the inside of me, urging me to remember what I had forgotten or never truly knew about my mother and the secret that had been buried with her, or maybe in her. The tooth I had found in the box with the spiral symbol haunted me relentlessly, like it was a key I couldn't resist turning, unlocking doors in my mind that I wished would remain closed, doors that revealed images so horrific and visceral I questioned my own sanity. Visions of my mother not as the soft, distracted woman in that old photograph, but as something else. A conduit, a vessel for an ancient ritual that the police files barely hinted at but which whispered through the archives and the dark corners of the internet I'd been scouring at all hours, where forgotten occult forums spoke of the mouth of the forest, a place where souls were swallowed and kept alive only through the ceaseless gnashing of teeth, where victims were not merely killed but transformed, broken down and reassembled into parts of a whole, a grotesque mosaic of flesh and bone, all bound by the spiral mark, the same one carved on the jawbone, on the trees, on those who vanished. And as I read, my fingers trembling over posts from users who claimed to be descendants or keepers of the ritual, I realized this was no mere local legend but something far older and darker, a pattern repeated throughout history, and my mother's disappearance was but a single thread in a tapestry woven from teeth and silence. I wanted to tell my father, to drag him into this nightmare, but he was unreachable, a ghost himself. His phone went straight to voicemail, his emails unanswered, and when I stopped by his last known address, it was abandoned, with the windows boarded up and the mailbox stuffed with old flyers and dust, as though he had simply ceased to exist, evaporated like the truth I was chasing. Alone and unraveling, I decided to return to that motel in Greystone where I first saw "Remember" scrawled on the mirror, desperate for any clue, and there I found something new. A small, leather-bound journal wedged between the mattress and box spring, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with entries in a handwriting eerily similar to my own. But the words were fragmented, cryptic, and laced with despair, speaking of a voice that spoke through teeth, of a forest that swallowed names, of a spiral that never ended, and the writers' fear that they were losing themselves to something ancient and patient, something that demanded sacrifice but not in blood alone, but in memory, identity, sanity. I brought the journal to Monroe, who, after reading it, paled and whispered, "This wasn't just your mother's story. There were others, family members, maybe distant cousins, who disappeared over the decades, all linked by this ritual, this symbol, this mouth." And he showed me a faded photograph from a case file we hadn't seen before, an old black and white image of a family gathering, with a little girl staring straight at the camera. It was me, but not as I am now, younger, with eyes too old for her face, and behind me, just barely visible in the blurred background, a woman with the same distracted look as my mother in that first photo, her mouth slightly open, teeth unnaturally sharp, just catching the light like they were waiting to speak something forbidden. That image, that moment, shattered what was left of my reality, and I knew the ritual was still alive, still reaching through time, pulling at the edges of my family, my memories, my very soul. I was no longer just a man searching for answers, but a part of the ritual itself, a witness trapped in a spiral of teeth and silence. And I feared that the next call from Detective Monroe would be the last thing I'd ever hear, because this was not a story to be solved, but a curse to be lived, and the teeth were coming for me. The weight of that journal in my hands was like carrying a coffin full of secrets I wished I had never unearthed. Its pages whispering of a history I was only beginning to understand, but that clawed at my mind like a living thing, twisting every memory of my childhood into something alien and hollow. Like the person I thought I was had been overwritten by an echo, a remnant of a story too dark to tell and too alive to ignore. After days spent poring over its words, I realized the ritual wasn't just a local myth or a string of unsolved cases. It was a cycle, an ancient mechanism for preserving something beyond death, a grotesque communion where teeth became more than bones and mouths. They were vessels for voices, containers of memory and essence, and those who were marked by the spiral symbol were bound by it, their fates intertwined in a labyrinth of flesh and silence that defied time itself. The ritual involved not just murder but transformation, the breaking down of identity and the painful rebirth into a form both human and something else. Something whispered about in the journal as the mouth, a liminal space between life and oblivion, where souls were trapped in an endless gnashing, sustained by the blood of those who remembered and the silence of those who forgot. As I read deeper, the entries became more fragmented, desperate, the author's handwriting sometimes devolving into scrawls that looked like they'd been written under duress or while slipping into madness, their words haunted by shadows of voices that didn't belong to them, warning of a coming reckoning, of teeth that would gnaw through flesh and bone until nothing remained but the spiral, the symbol, the endless mouth waiting patiently to claim its next witness. I became obsessed, chasing every thread I could find, calling experts in forensic anthropology and occult history, piecing together fragments of a forgotten cult that had thrived in the shadows of small towns like Greystone for generations, their marks hidden in plain sight on trees, bones, and sometimes even in the patterns of teeth themselves. But the deeper I went, the more I felt myself slipping away, like my own teeth were starting to ache with a hunger I couldn't explain, like something had nested beneath my gums and was growing steadily, patiently, until I was no longer the hunter but the prey. My phone rang endlessly with unknown numbers, calls that ended in static and a faint, ragged whisper I could never catch clearly, but that left a cold dread in my chest. Friends and family drifted away as I withdrew into the nightmare, the only anchor left being Detective Monroe, who grew increasingly grave with each meeting, sharing police files sealed since the earliest disappearances, revealing that the ritual had been covered up by authorities desperate to keep the truth from spilling out, and that the pattern of victims extended far beyond what anyone imagined, with names erased, files shredded, and bones scattered in the woods to keep the secret buried. One night, Monroe handed me an envelope that changed everything. Inside was a letter from my mother, written just days before her disappearance, addressed to me. A letter no one had known existed, with words that chilled me to the bone. If you find this, know that I fought to break free from the mouth. The teeth are not just teeth. They are voices. They hold us, and the spiral never ends. Don't trust the silence. Tears blurred my vision as I realized she had known, had tried to warn me from beyond the grave, but that warning only deepened the terror, because if she had fought and lost, what chance did I have? That night, the dreams exploded into vivid nightmares. I was trapped inside a cavernous mouth, walls made of bone and enamel, teeth grinding around me in a rhythm like a heartbeat, while whispers echoed from the shadows, voices begging to be released, warning that the mouth hungered for me now, that the spiral's pull was irreversible. Waking, I found my jaw bleeding, a sharp pain where no tooth should be, and a fresh carving on my bathroom mirror, the spiral symbol drawn in what looked like blood but smelled faintly of earth and decay. The next day, Monroe took me back to the forest, to a hidden clearing no one had marked, where the ground was soft and warm beneath my feet, and there, half buried in moss and leaves, was a rusted metal box. Inside, a broken music box playing a haunting lullaby that twisted and warped the air around us, and a collection of teeth, human, animal, all arranged in the spiral, the same pattern that had haunted my life, and then the unmistakable sensation that someone was watching us, that the forest itself was alive with waiting, with hunger. Monroe's face was pale as he whispered, "This is the mouth. It's awake, and it's coming for you." I felt my throat close as a cold wave of fear washed over me, knowing that no matter how far I ran or how deep I hid, the spiral would always find me. that the teeth were not just remnants of the past but living sentinels of an ancient evil, and that the last piece of the puzzle, me, was the final witness, the one who would either break the cycle or become its next sacrifice, swallowed whole by the endless mouth waiting patiently in the forest's heart, gnashing its teeth for the last time. After that day in the forest, I felt the world closing in around me, like the walls of that ancient mouth were slowly tightening, squeezing the last remnants of normalcy from my life. The nights grew longer, darker, and every shadow seemed to pulse with a silent threat, every whisper of wind through the trees a sinister reminder that the mouth was not just a place but a presence, a force reaching out with jagged teeth made not only of bone but of memory, time, and fear, wrapping itself around me, whispering secrets that I both wanted and feared to hear. Truths about my mother, about the ritual, and about the terrible legacy I had inherited without knowing it. I started finding strange markings on my body, faint scratches in the shape of the spiral, appearing overnight on my arms and neck, some painful, some merely itching like the skin was trying to remember something buried deep beneath the flesh, and no matter how hard I scrubbed or how much I tried to ignore them, they only multiplied, spreading like a slow poison, a creeping brand marking me as part of something ancient and unholy. My reflection in the mirror began to distort. Sometimes it was my face, but other times, flickering like a dying film reel, it was my mother's, or a faceless figure with teeth like knives, its mouth stretching impossibly wide, a dark spiral swirling behind its eyes, promising oblivion and something worse. I withdrew from friends and work, consumed by a gnawing need to uncover the full truth, to find a way to end the cycle before it claimed me entirely. But every lead I chased brought me closer to the edge of madness and further into the mouth's grasp, until even Detective Monroe warned me that this was no longer just a case or a mystery, but a battle for my soul. He shared with me ancient texts, forgotten rituals recorded in journals locked away in the deepest archives, describing a race of beings who fed on the boundaries between life and death, using teeth as vessels and spirals as seals to trap souls in eternal torment, and how the only way to stop them was to break the spiral, to speak the true name hidden beneath the layers of lies and silence. But that name was dangerous, and speaking it could either free the trapped or unleash the mouth's full hunger upon the world. Desperation drove me back to my childhood home, or what was left of it, only to find it burned to the ground, ashes still warm beneath my feet, and inside the ruins, carved into the scorched floor, was the spiral symbol, scorched deep and fresh, as if the mouth was claiming territory, a warning that nowhere was safe. That night, I dreamed of a gathering, shadowy figures in the woods surrounding a stone altar, their mouths stretched into impossible smiles, teeth grinding in a rhythm that echoed in my bones, chanting in a language older than time itself, promising release but delivering only silence and decay. I woke to find a letter slipped under my motel door, written in the same shaky hand as the journal, saying only, "The teeth remember, you cannot forget. The mouth waits." I realized then that the ritual had never ended. It had only been paused, waiting for me to return, waiting for the spiral to complete itself, and that I was both the key and the final sacrifice. My body felt alien, like it was changing from within, teeth growing beneath my gums, a constant ache in my jaw, and a hunger I couldn't satisfy no matter how much I ate. A hunger not for food, but for something darker. I reached out one last time to Monroe, who told me grimly that they had uncovered one final clue, an old diary belonging to a woman named Eleanor, who had vanished decades ago but whose writings described a ritual to silence the mouth by offering the last witness a choice, to become the mouth's voice or to be consumed entirely. As I held that diary, reading Eleanor's trembling script, I understood the impossible decision before me. To resist meant losing myself to madness and death. To surrender meant becoming part of the mouth, the endless spiral of teeth and silence that swallowed all who dared remember. And so here I am, writing this as a warning, as a confession, and perhaps as a last plea. If you find this, know that the mouth is real, that it feeds on memory, fear, and silence, and that the teeth are always waiting, gnashing just beyond the edge of sight. Do not speak the spiral's name, do not search the forest's depths, and whatever you do, do not let the teeth speak through you, because once the mouth opens, there may be no coming back from the abyss. I don't even know where to begin anymore, because the line between reality and nightmare has long since dissolved, leaving me adrift in a swirling abyss where every shadow whispers secrets I don't want to hear but cannot ignore. Since reading Eleanor's diary and receiving that final, chilling letter, I've become consumed by a suffocating sense of inevitability, like the spiral is tightening around my soul, and every breath draws me closer to a fate my mother tried to warn me against but couldn't. Escape herself, and the teeth, those terrible teeth, gnaw relentlessly at the edges of my mind, their jagged edges scraping against my sanity, carving away pieces of who I thought I was until I'm left raw and trembling beneath their unyielding pressure. My dreams have turned into waking hallucinations, flashes of that cavernous mouth opening wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth dripping with darkness, voices screaming silently in a tongue older than human memory, beckoning me deeper into the forest where time dissolves and nothing exists but the gnashing, the spiral, and the insatiable hunger that consumes all who dare remember. My reflection no longer shows me, but a shifting face of decay and distortion, my own eyes replaced with hollow voids, and sometimes I glimpse her, my mother, with that distracted, haunted expression, mouth stretched unnaturally wide, whispering things I can't quite catch but that send icy fear flooding my veins. The scratches on my skin have multiplied into a network of spirals, pulsing faintly like they have a life of their own, marking me as part of the ritual I've tried to unravel but which now feels like a trap closing around me. A snare set long ago and finally springing shut. Detective Monroe has become my only tether to reality, though even he looks haunted and defeated, revealing that the investigation has uncovered more bodies, more spirals carved into bones and bark, more signs that the mouth is awakening, expanding, beyond its ancient bounds, hungry for more souls to consume in its endless spiral of teeth and silence. I found myself drawn back to the edge of the forest one night, compelled by a force I couldn't resist, stepping past the barricades and into the thick, choking darkness where the air tastes of rot and ancient sorrow, the ground beneath me soft and pulsing as if alive, and then I saw it. A massive tree twisted into the shape of a gaping mouth, roots like jagged teeth biting into the earth, bark scarred with symbols that shimmered faintly in the moonlight, and at its base, an altar of bones arranged in the spiral pattern that had become my curse. I wanted to run, but my legs betrayed me, rooted to the spot as voices rose around me, chanting in that terrible tongue, promising release and warning of oblivion. And then I felt the cold brush of something against my cheek, a breath or a whisper, and I knew the mouth had claimed me, that I was no longer just a witness but part of the ritual, caught forever in the endless cycle of gnashing teeth and silence. I barely made it back to my motel, collapsing onto the floor, the taste of earth and decay thick on my tongue, my jaw aching with the growing teeth beneath my gums, and the knowledge that the spiral will never end, that the mouth will always hunger, always wait, always claim those who dare remember the truth buried beneath the silence. I'm writing this now because it might be the last thing I ever do, a final warning, carved into the void for anyone who finds it. Beware the teeth, the spiral, and the mouth that waits patiently in the forest's heart. For once it speaks through you, the nightmare is eternal, and the silence that follows is worse than death. I don't know how to explain the way my mind has started fracturing, how every moment feels like I'm slipping through a crack in reality, where the edges are frayed with the sound of gnashing teeth and whispering voices that no one else can hear, as if the mouth, the endless spiral of bone and silence, is not just a place or a curse but a living thing that's burrowing its way into my consciousness, reshaping my memories and twisting my very perception of who I am and who my mother was. Since that night in the forest, when I stood before the twisted treemouth altar and heard the chanting echoing through the shadows, I've been plagued by visions so vivid I can barely distinguish them from waking life. The hollow eyes of those lost souls, trapped in the spiral, their faces contorted in silent screams, mouths full of teeth that grind against one another like 1,000 knives scraping through bone. I've begun to notice the world bending around me, time folding and unfolding in strange loops, days blending into nights without warning, conversations repeating themselves with slight, eerie variations, and in every reflection, a flicker of something watching from behind my own eyes, waiting for me to finally break and speak the name hidden beneath the spiral's twisting lines. The scratches on my skin have grown into raw, bleeding scars shaped like the ancient symbol, and no matter how much I try to wash, cover, or hide them, they throb with a terrible pulse. a heartbeat not my own, syncing with the gnashing rhythm that echoes in the depths of my jaw where new teeth are forcing their way through, sharp and unnatural, growing faster than they should, twisting my mouth into a grotesque mockery of the cavern I've been dreaming about for months. Detective Monroe has become a shadow of himself, his face drawn and pale, his voice hollow when he speaks of the increasing number of bodies found, skeletal remains arranged in spirals like dark prayers to the mouth, some fresh enough to send chills through my bones, others decades old but all marked by the same symbol, the same teeth twisted into impossible shapes that speak of ancient rituals designed to trap souls and voices in endless torment. He warned me once more, his eyes filled with dread, that I am no longer just a man searching for the truth, but a part of the mouth's design, the final witness whose memories and fears fuel the dark spiral, and that the ritual will soon demand its final sacrifice, either my silence or my voice, and that the choice is not mine to make but a destiny written in teeth and bone long before I was born. Every night, the line between sleep and wakefulness dissolves, and I find myself walking the forest paths, pulled by an unseen force toward the altar, where the spirals of bone pulse with a terrible life, and the faces of the lost whisper their torment through the grinding teeth, begging me to remember what was hidden beneath the silence, to speak the spiral's true name and either free them or doom us all. I've tried to run, to forget, to ignore the gnawing ache in my jaw and the dark hunger growing beneath my skin, but it's no use. The mouth has claimed me, and the teeth are growing stronger, sharper, feeding on my fear and my blood, and every day I feel myself slipping further into that endless spiral of teeth and silence, knowing that soon I will be forced to open my mouth and speak what must never be spoken or be consumed whole by the terrible void that waits in the heart of the forest. This story, this warning, is all I have left to give, to carve into the world before the mouth silences me forever. And if you find these words, know that the teeth remember, the spiral never ends, and the mouth waits patiently, gnashing its teeth for the next soul brave or foolish enough to listen. I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on to what's left of myself, the edges of my mind fraying and dissolving like ink bleeding into water, each day blurring into the next, marked only by the growing gnawing ache in my jaw where those unnatural teeth have rooted deeper, twisting and sharp like shards of broken glass, making every word I speak sound like a scream muffled behind a mouthful of razor blades. My sleep is no refuge. There's no escape from the mouth's cold embrace, no sanctuary from the relentless gnashing echoing in my dreams, where I'm trapped inside a dark cavern with walls of bone and enamel, the spiral symbol glowing faintly on every surface like a sick, pulsating heart, and the voices of the lost swirl around me, whispering secrets I cannot forget but dare not remember fully, secrets that twist my soul and threaten to pull me into the eternal spiral of silence and teeth. I've tried to find help, but no one understands. My friends drifted away as I retreated into obsession, and Detective Monroe, the last tether to the truth, has grown distant, his eyes hollow and haunted, as though the ritual's darkness has reached him too, corrupting and consuming everything it touches. The more I uncover, the more the spiral tightens around me. The old police files, the forbidden texts about the mouth and its ancient hunger, the diary of Eleanor who warned of the choice I must face, become my only companions in a world gone mad. I've returned countless times to the forest's edge, each visit more harrowing than the last, the trees themselves seeming to lean closer, their branches like twisted jaws waiting to snap shut, and at the heart of the wood stands the mouth, the grotesque tree formation carved by time and ritual into a gaping maw, roots curling like sharp teeth and bark scarred with spirals glowing faintly under the moonlight, pulsing with a life that is not quite natural. Once, I stood at its base, trembling, as the ground beneath me vibrated like a living thing, and the air thickened with whispers, some pleading, some threatening, all speaking the spiral's true name, a word that shreds the mind to say aloud, and I felt the terrible pull of the ritual trying to claim me, to make me the mouth's voice, the final link in an endless chain of suffering and silence. I resisted, stumbling away into the darkness, only to find my body betraying me. The new teeth growing unchecked, sharp and jagged, pressing against my gums until my jaw throbbed with unbearable pain and strange markings bleeding beneath my skin, spirals pulsing faintly as if alive, branding me as part of the mouth's twisted design. Detective Monroe's warnings echoed in my ears. He told me that the ritual is a living curse, an ancient hunger that feeds on memory and fear, that the spiral's end is never truly an end but a beginning of silence and consumption, and that I am both prey and key, trapped in a nightmare that will consume my voice or my life. I'm writing this now as a desperate plea, a warning carved into the void that the mouth is real, ancient, and patient, and that the teeth wait in the forest's heart, ready to gnash and consume any soul brave or foolish enough to listen. If you find these words, do not seek the spiral, do not follow the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you. Because once it does, there may be no return from the endless gnashing teeth and the silence that follows, worse than death itself. Since that last night in the forest, when the ancient treemouth altar seemed to breathe beneath my touch and the spiral carvings glowed faintly with a light that was not of this world, my entire existence has been consumed by an unbearable weight. A pressure that crushes the edges of my sanity and warps the very fabric of reality around me, as if the mouth is not just a place but a living entity reaching out through time and flesh to claim me utterly. The teeth growing inside me have multiplied, beyond reason, sharp and jagged like shards of glass embedded in my gums, each movement of my jaw a symphony of pain and hunger that no meal can quell, a gnawing torment that echoes the relentless gnashing of that eternal cavern I see in my dreams. The same cavernous mouth lined with spirals of bone, echoing with voices that whisper secrets so old they feel like a disease infecting my mind with every syllable. I wake in cold sweats, the taste of earth and decay thick on my tongue, the scratches and spirals on my arms now raised scars pulsing faintly as if alive, branding me as part of an ancient design written in blood, bone, and silence, a design I am helpless to resist no matter how hard I fight. Every reflection has become a window into a nightmare. My face distorted, sometimes melting into that of my mother, sometimes into a faceless specter with a mouth impossibly wide, teeth sharp as razors and endless as the spiral itself, promising oblivion but delivering only the terrible. Hunger that drives the mouth to grow and consume. Detective Monroe's warnings haunt me. The knowledge that the ritual spans generations, binding families and souls to the mouth's unyielding will, that the spiral is not just a symbol but a prison and a key, that I am both prey and final witness, caught in a cycle of horror that cannot be broken without sacrifice. I've scoured every dusty archive, every forgotten journal, every whispered legend about the mouth, uncovering tales of people who vanished without a trace, their remains discovered in the forest arranged in spirals of bone and teeth, evidence of a ritual older than memory itself, designed to trap voices, to steal identity, and to feed a hunger that has no end. The forest itself has become a living nightmare, the trees groaning and creaking like jaws, the wind carrying whispers that curl around my mind and twist my thoughts into knots of terror and fascination, drawing me back again and again to that gaping maw where the mouth waits patiently for its next voice. I feel the spiral tightening inside me, an invisible noose forged from teeth and silence, squeezing the last fragments of hope and resistance until all that remains is the gnashing hunger, the terrible compulsion to speak the spiral's true name and become the mouth's final voice or to surrender to oblivion, swallowed whole by the endless dark. This story, these words, are all I have left to hold on to, a desperate plea carved into the void, a warning to anyone who finds it. Beware the spiral, beware the mouth, and above all, beware the teeth that wait patiently in the forest's heart, ready to gnash, to consume, and to silence forever. It feels like the mouth is no longer just a distant nightmare but an ever-present weight crushing me from the inside out, as if every breath I take is filled with the scent of decay and ancient rot, and every beat of my heart echoes the grinding of teeth somewhere just beyond perception, gnashing endlessly in a spiral that binds past, present, and future into a single terrifying loop. The teeth beneath my gums have multiplied to the point where I can feel them shifting painfully with every word. I try to speak, sharp shards stabbing the soft tissue inside my mouth, turning every conversation into a torment of agony and silence. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I don't see my own reflection but a fractured visage, a flickering collage of faces I've seen in the photographs from the case files, including my mother's pale, haunted eyes, always watching, always waiting. The scratches on my skin have evolved into deep, angry scars glowing faintly with a sickly light that pulses in time with the gnashing I hear in my dreams, and I know those marks are more than just skin deep. They are a connection, a bond to the mouth, a seal that marks me as part of a ritual older than any law or history, a ritual designed to consume voices and trap souls in an endless, grinding spiral of teeth and silence. Detective Monroe's visits have become infrequent, and when they come, his face is etched with exhaustion and dread, his voice barely above a whisper as he shares what little hope remains, that a ritual recorded in Eleanor's diary may yet sever the spiral, free the trapped souls, and end the mouth's hunger, but only if the last witness, me, can find the strength to speak the true name hidden beneath the spirals and accept the terrible sacrifice that comes with breaking the cycle. The forest calls to me still, its shadows thick and alive, and I find myself drawn back time and again to that grotesque tree-mouth altar, the bark carved deep with spirals that glow faintly. Beneath the moonlight, the roots twisted like jagged teeth biting into the earth, as if the forest itself is waiting, patient and hungry, its breath cold against my skin, whispering promises and threats in a language older than time. I am consumed by a gnawing hunger that no food can satisfy, a hunger not for flesh but for release from the spiral's hold. But every time I try to resist, the teeth grow sharper, the scars burn brighter, and the voices grow louder, whispering the spiral's true name, urging me to speak, to open my mouth and become the mouth's voice, or be swallowed whole in silence, consumed by the endless gnashing teeth waiting at the forest's heart. This is my final confession, my desperate plea carved into the void, a warning to anyone who finds these words. Do not seek the spiral, do not follow the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, the nightmare is eternal, and the silence that follows is worse than death itself. This is the last thing I write before the spiral closes around me forever, the final echo of a voice caught in the endless gnashing teeth of the mouth, a warning and a confession carved into the darkness for anyone who might find it and understand what I could not escape. The forest has claimed me fully now, its breath cold against my skin, the scars glowing brighter than ever as the teeth beneath my gums twist and grind relentlessly, a ceaseless ache that no painkiller can dull, a hunger that no meal can sate, and every night I dream of that cavernous mouth, its walls alive with bone and spirals pulsing with ancient energy, voices trapped within begging for release or revenge, their hollow eyes burning into my soul as I stand on the edge of oblivion. The spirals end both a promise and a curse. Detective Monroe's warnings haunt me still. There is no breaking the cycle without sacrifice, no silence without blood, and now I understand that I am both the key and the final victim, destined to become the mouth's voice or be swallowed whole by its endless hunger. And as the voices grow louder, as the teeth press ever closer to my tongue, I feel my own voice slipping away, fading into the gnashing, grinding symphony of the mouth's ancient appetite. I write this in a final act of defiance, a desperate plea that someone, anyone, might find these words and choose differently, that the spiral might one day be broken by a stronger will. But I fear it is already too late for me, and as the last light fades from my eyes and the spiral tightens, I know that soon the mouth will open wide to swallow me whole, adding my voice to the countless others trapped in its eternal silence, gnashing teeth waiting patiently in the heart of the forest for the next soul to remember, to speak, and to disappear. If you find this, heed my warning. Do not follow the spiral, do not seek the mouth, and above all, do not let the teeth speak through you, for once they do, there is no return. Only the endless gnashing and the silence worse than death itself. I never thought something like this could happen to my family. My brother, Jamie, was just an ordinary guy trying to make ends meet. He had recently started driving for one of those popular rideshare apps. You know, the kind where you pick up random people, help them get where they need to go, and hope for good tips. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Jamie was good at it. He was always careful, always checked the app, made sure he had the right passenger, and never took any unnecessary risks. But one night, everything went horribly wrong. It was late, around 11 p.m., and Jamie texted me, saying he had one last ride before he'd be done for the night. That's the last message I got from him. He told me the pickup was on the east side of town near some rundown apartment complex I'd never heard of, and that the passenger looked normal enough, but there was something about the name on the app that made Jamie uneasy. He told me it was a common name, but with a strange middle initial he'd never seen before. Still, Jamie shrugged it off and went to pick the passenger up. That was the last time anyone saw him. The next morning, Jamie didn't show up for work, and his phone was off. His car was found abandoned on a deserted road miles away from the pickup spot, engine running, doors unlocked, but no sign of Jamie or the passenger. The police were baffled. The app showed that the ride had ended, but the GPS data was weird. The route Jamie supposedly took was all over the place, circling back and forth through neighborhoods known for high crime rates and abandoned industrial zones. When we dug into the passenger's profile, things got worse. The identity used to book the ride was stolen. The real person had no idea their name was being used, and the profile picture was a stock image lifted from the internet. The more we tried to find out who the passenger was, the more it felt like chasing smoke. No one knew anything, and the app company was strangely unhelpful, citing privacy rules and refusing to release more information. I started doing my own digging, checking security cams near the pickup location, talking to other drivers who might have seen something, looking for clues in the app data we could get through unofficial channels. Nothing concrete turned up, but the weird patterns in the GPS trail made me realize Jamie was being forced to drive in loops, going places he shouldn't have, maybe trying to buy time or avoid something. And then came the nightmares. Vivid dreams where I saw Jamie trapped in the back seat of his own car, eyes wide with terror, while a shadowy figure sat in the passenger seat, face obscured but always watching, always waiting. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and the police weren't making progress. It felt like Jamie had vanished into thin air, swallowed whole by some nightmare no one wanted to admit existed. I kept hoping the passenger was just a runaway or someone with a messed up past who scared Jamie into hiding. But as the days turned into weeks, the hope faded. Then I found a message on Jamie's phone from an unknown number. It was a photo of a dark highway with the words, "Keep driving, or you'll disappear too." No name, no signature, just the ominous warning. I knew then that whatever my brother got mixed up in was bigger and darker than I ever imagined, involving stolen identities, dangerous people lurking behind innocent faces, and a game of cat and mouse where the stakes were life and death. I'm writing this now because if anyone can hear this story, you need to know rideshare apps can be dangerous when the people you pick up aren't who they seem, and sometimes the last passenger isn't just a customer, but a harbinger of something terrifying, something that can make a person vanish without a trace. I'm still searching, still hoping, but deep down I fear that Jamie's disappearance is just the beginning, and that the shadow behind that stolen identity is still out there, waiting for the next driver brave or unlucky enough to pick them up. The days after Jamie vanished were a blur of frantic calls, dead-end leads, and a gnawing sense of dread that no amount of searching could soothe. I remember sitting in his empty apartment, the silence pressing in like a physical force, every little thing reminding me he was gone. The worn-out jacket hanging on the coat rack, the half-finished cup of coffee still sitting on the kitchen table, the little sticky notes he left on the fridge with reminders and phone numbers. I combed through his phone, desperate for clues, anything that could explain what had happened, but apart from the mysterious message from that unknown number, the one with the dark highway photo and the chilling warning, I found nothing out of the ordinary, except maybe for a few texts that didn't quite add up. There were a couple of messages to a contact saved as M that had been deleted, but the previews lingered in the phone's memory, fragments of conversations hinting at meetings in shadowy places, mentions of needing proof and staying quiet. My gut told me this M was connected to the passenger, maybe the person behind the stolen identity, but Jamie had been careful. He never mentioned meeting anyone outside his rides, and if he did, it was only in passing. I began to dig deeper, scouring social media profiles, online forums, anything that could lead me to this mysterious figure. What I found chilled me. There was a pattern of disappearances connected to rideshare drivers over the past few years. Drivers vanishing without a trace, cars found abandoned in desolate locations, GPS data showing strange detours and loops, just like Jamie's last ride. The victims were mostly younger men, alone, working late shifts, and the only common thread seemed to be the final passenger, a name or profile that turned out to be fake, stolen, or completely untraceable. Police reports were minimal or non-existent, the disappearances written off as runaways or unsolved cases that gathered dust. But the families knew. They whispered warnings online, sharing stories and photos, begging for answers, for help, but always fearful of retaliation from whoever was behind the stolen identities and the disappearances. One message I found was from a mother whose son had vanished last year. Her words were desperate and raw, saying that after he disappeared, she received a call from an unknown number with nothing but static and a low, guttural whisper that sounded like someone speaking through broken teeth. I started to feel like I was being watched, like my phone was bugged, my emails monitored, and every time I left my apartment, I caught glimpses of shadowy figures just out of sight. The fear wasn't just for Jamie anymore. It was for me, for my safety, for the terrible realization that whoever was behind this was still out there, hunting, waiting for the next driver to slip into the endless spiral of stolen identities and vanished souls. I began sleeping with the lights on, checking my locks twice, and carrying a small knife in my pocket. But none of it helped against the creeping horror of knowing I was now part of this dark story, tangled in a web that stretched far beyond my understanding, where every click of the app and every unfamiliar passenger could be a step closer to disappearing like Jamie. And then, one night, while reviewing the last GPS data from Jamie's phone on a sketchy online map, I noticed something, an anomaly that hadn't been there before. The route Jamie's car supposedly took was not random. It followed a spiral pattern, a slowly widening coil that seemed to pulse on the map, almost like a message or a trap laid out in digital space. As I zoomed in, the spiral's center landed on an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a place rumored to be a hotspot for illegal activities, but no one had ever found anything concrete. My heart pounded as I realized this was more than coincidence. It was a clue, a desperate message from Jamie, or a warning left by the entity behind the stolen identity. I had to go there. I had to find out what was waiting inside that warehouse, what the spiral meant, and whether Jamie was still alive, or if he was already swallowed whole by something darker and more twisted than I could have imagined. Armed with a flashlight, my phone, and a shaky courage, I stepped into the night, toward the spiral's center, knowing that this path might lead me to answers or to my own disappearance. The warehouse loomed ahead, silent and foreboding, shadows spilling from broken windows, the scent of rust and decay thick in the air. And somewhere inside, I could feel it, the faint, sickening sound of gnashing teeth, echoing from the darkness, waiting for me to come closer, waiting to pull me into the spiral's endless, devouring maw. Stepping inside that warehouse was like crossing into a different world. A cold, stale darkness that swallowed the beam of my flashlight hole, broken only by faint shafts of moonlight leaking through shattered windows high above, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to writhe and shift as I moved deeper into the cavernous space. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rust, and every step I took echoed like a scream, bouncing off walls stained with time and secrets. The silence, broken only by a distant drip of water somewhere in the dark, each drop marking out an impossible rhythm, a countdown or maybe a warning. As I pressed forward, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it would betray me, I noticed something strange, walls covered in scrawled symbols, spirals carved deep into the peeling paint, some fresh and glistening, others cracked and faded with age. A terrible sign that this place was not just abandoned, but consecrated to something sinister, a ritual space, forged in shadow and fear, and the deeper I ventured, the more these spirals multiplied, wrapping around support beams and stacked crates like a serpent coiling tighter and tighter. Then, near the center of the warehouse, I found it. An altar fashioned from broken car parts and shattered glass, with old bones scattered across it, some human, some animal, all arranged meticulously in that same sick spiral pattern that haunted Jamie's GPS trail and the nightmare in my mind. As I crouched to examine the grisly display, a sudden noise made me freeze. A faint scratching sound, like fingernails scraping on concrete, coming from the far end of the warehouse, where darkness pooled thickest. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly raised my flashlight, the beam trembling, trying to pierce the blackness, and then I saw it. A shadowy figure standing just beyond the reach of the light, its face obscured by a mask fashioned from fractured mirror shards that caught the faint light and scattered it into cruel, jagged patterns like shattered teeth grinning down at me. The figure's eyes gleamed with a terrible hunger, and before I could react, it whispered my brother's name, voice low and rasping, as if the sound itself was scraping across broken glass, and a wave of nausea hit me as the room seemed to spin, the spirals on the walls pulsing with an unholy light, tightening like a noose. I stumbled backward, almost dropping my flashlight, and in that moment of panic, I caught a glimpse of a crumpled notebook on the altar, its pages filled with frantic scrawls in a hand that I recognized immediately. Jamie's handwriting, desperate notes about the stolen identity, the spiral pattern, and a name he'd uncovered that chilled me to the bone: the mouth. According to his writings, the mouth was not just a metaphor but a terrifying entity, an ancient presence that fed on the fear and voices of those trapped within its spiral, a predator lurking behind stolen identities and empty profiles, dragging victims into an endless cycle of silence and gnashing teeth. Jamie had discovered that the stolen passenger wasn't a person but a manifestation, a mask worn by this entity to lure drivers into its trap, using the spiral as a ritual to bind them forever. I realized then that this was no ordinary disappearance, no simple crime. This was a living nightmare, and I was standing at its center, the next prey caught in the widening spiral, with the gnashing teeth waiting to claim me just as they had claimed my brother. The figure took a slow, deliberate step forward, and I raised my flashlight, shining it directly into the mask, only to see the fractured reflections of my own terrified face staring back, and I understood then that the mouth was not just hunting us. It was us, a dark mirror reflecting our fears and secrets, waiting to swallow every last voice into silence. I ran, heart pounding, through the twisting aisles of the warehouse, the scratching and whispering growing louder, spirals glowing faintly on every surface as if alive, closing in around me, and as I burst out into the night, gasping for breath, the last thing I saw was that terrible grin of jagged, broken teeth fading into the darkness, promising that the spiral would never end, and that the mouth was always hungry for the next soul to disappear. After that night in the warehouse, everything changed. I could no longer pretend this was some isolated nightmare or a strange coincidence. The spiral had wrapped around me tighter than ever, squeezing out any hope of escape, and the gnashing teeth of the mouth echoed in every moment of silence, a pulse in the darkness that I could neither turn off nor outrun. I started to notice how the world around me twisted, faces and crowds blurred into masks of broken glass, every reflection cracked and fractured like that cursed mirror mask in the warehouse, and even the simplest sounds became distorted, whispers just beneath the surface, urging me to look deeper into the spiral, to accept what I had become. My phone, once a tool for finding answers, now only delivered static and fragments of messages from numbers I didn't recognize, voices speaking in that terrible language Jamie wrote about, the one older than time, promising freedom if I'd just open my mouth and say the forbidden name, or damnation if I refused. The scratches on my skin, the spirals Jamie warned about, had spread, forming patterns that throbbed with a sickly light beneath the surface, and I could feel them pulsing like a second heartbeat, a dark rhythm syncing with the gnashing within my jaw, where the new teeth were growing faster and sharper every day, turning my mouth into a prison and a weapon. Sleep became a battleground, with nightmares so vivid and relentless that I'd wake soaked in sweat, heart racing, my breath caught in a cold panic, trapped in that cavernous mouth of bone and spirals, surrounded by those lost souls whose hollow eyes begged me to remember the truth buried beneath the silence. Detective Monroe was the only one who still believed me, though even he looked broken and haunted now, his voice trembling as he shared what little hope remained, that the spiral could be broken, but only at a terrible cost, a sacrifice written in blood and silence, and that the last witness, me, had to choose whether to become the mouth's voice or be consumed entirely. The lines between past and present blurred as I found myself trapped in a waking nightmare, memories of Jamie intertwined with my own fears, visions of the twisted tree mouth altar growing in my mind's eye, roots like jagged teeth biting deep into the earth, bark scarred with spirals pulsing faintly under moonlight. I was drawn back to the forest's edge repeatedly, compelled by a force I could neither resist nor understand, feeling the cold breath of the mouth whisper against my skin, promising release or oblivion. And then, one night, as I stood beneath the twisted tree, the spiral carved deep into its bark glowing with a sick, unnatural light, I heard the voice again, that guttural whisper through broken teeth, calling my name, urging me to speak the forbidden word that would end the cycle or seal my fate forever. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but the teeth in my mouth ached. The scars burned, and I knew that no matter what I chose, the mouth had claimed me, and that soon, very soon, I would be swallowed whole into its endless spiral of gnashing teeth and silence. This story is all I have left, a desperate plea carved into the void for anyone who finds it. Beware the spiral, beware the mouth waiting in the shadows, and above all, beware the teeth that remember. For once they speak through you, the nightmare is eternal, and the silence that follows is worse than death itself. The spiral has become more than just a symbol. It's a sickness eating away at every part of me. My thoughts, my memories, even the way I move and speak. Each day I feel more like a hollow shell filled with gnashing teeth and silent screams, as if the mouth inside me has started to consume not just my body but my very soul. And sometimes when I catch my reflection in a cracked mirror or the dark screen of my phone, I don't recognize the face staring back. A face twisted and warped, the skin stretched tight over jagged teeth that gleam beneath my lips like a predator ready to snap. Sleep has become a curse, a long descent into that endless cavern of bone and spirals where I see Jamie's terrified eyes locked on mine, pleading silently as shadows with fractured mirror faces circle around us, whispering the spiral's true name in a language older than death. And I wake with my jaw clenched so tight it bleeds, the pain a brutal reminder that the mouth is real and growing stronger inside. Me, Detective Monroe, stopped coming weeks ago, his warnings replaced by silence and cold looks, like he knows the end is near but is powerless to stop it. And I'm left alone to navigate this nightmare that's bleeding into every corner of my life. The whispered voices in my phone calls, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes, the spirals that crawl beneath my skin like living tattoos, glowing faintly in the dark and pulsing with a terrible rhythm that syncs with the gnashing of teeth echoing inside my mouth. I've tried to run, to escape the forest, the warehouse, the spiral, but no matter where I go, I feel the mouth's presence trailing me like a shadow, its hunger clawing at my bones, and every night the spiral burns brighter on my skin, like a brand marking me as the next victim or the final sacrifice in a ritual that has claimed countless lives before mine. Memories of Jamie flood me. The last ride, the stolen identity, the spiral pattern, and that terrible warning, keep driving, or you'll disappear too. And now I understand that the mouth doesn't just take lives. It steals voices, trapping them in an endless cycle of silence and gnashing teeth. And I fear that soon I will be nothing more than a whisper caught between the spirals, a lost soul swallowed by a darkness older than time itself. As I write this, I hear the gnashing again, faint but growing louder, and the spiral pulses beneath my skin, promising that the end is near and that soon I must choose. Speak the forbidden name and become the mouth's voice, breaking the cycle at a terrible cost, or be consumed whole, swallowed by the silence worse than death. This is my final plea. If you find these words, do not follow the spiral, do not answer the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, there is no escape from the endless gnashing teeth and the spiral that never ends. The mouth's hunger has become a constant ache beneath my skin, a gnawing, relentless pressure that no amount of distraction or denial can soothe, and every day I feel myself slipping further into that terrible spiral, both a place and a curse, where time warps and memories twist into nightmarish echoes that repeat themselves over and over, like a broken record grinding against bone. The spirals carved into my skin have spread, glowing faintly beneath the surface like a dark pulse synced with the gnashing teeth growing uncontrollably in my jaw, so sharp and numerous now that speaking feels like tearing flesh, and I find myself whispering words I don't understand, sounds that scrape across my throat with the rasp of broken glass and the cold promise of oblivion. Sleep is no longer a refuge but a battleground where I am trapped inside that cavernous mouth, a living hell of spiraling bone and grinding teeth, surrounded by ghostly faces trapped in silent screams, eyes hollow and pleading, their voices a chorus of madness that claw at my mind, urging me to surrender and speak the forbidden name that could either save us all or doom us forever. Detective Monroe's warnings echo in my head like a death knell, telling me that the ritual is ancient, a curse older than any law or history, designed to feed on fear and silence, and that I am the final witness, the last thread in a chain of horrors stretching back generations, destined to either become the mouth's voice or be consumed, entirely in its endless gnashing maw. I've returned to the forest's edge more times than I can count, drawn like a moth to a flame by that twisted tree-mouth altar, its bark scarred with spirals glowing faintly in the moonlight, roots curling like jagged teeth digging deep into the earth, waiting patiently, a predator hungry for the next soul to be swallowed. Every visit leaves me more broken, more hollow, as if the mouth reaches out with invisible jaws to snatch what's left of my sanity. And I feel its breath cold against my skin, its whispers promising release or oblivion, depending on the choice I make when the time comes to open my mouth and speak or be silenced forever. This story is all I have left, a desperate warning carved into the void for anyone who finds it. Do not follow the spiral, do not listen to the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, the spiral will never end, and the silence that follows is worse than death itself. It's hard to describe the weight of knowing that the mouth is no longer just some dark story whispered in fear, but something living inside me, gnawing away at the edges of my sanity like a disease slowly eating through flesh and bone. The teeth beneath my gums have multiplied into a twisted, razor-sharp maze that tortures every word I try to say, making my voice crack and splinter into fragments of something unrecognizable, a broken echo of myself that sounds like it belongs to some monstrous thing lurking just beneath the surface of my skin, and every night I wake choking on phantom whispers that curl through the hollow caverns of my mind. Voices that speak in that ancient spiral language Jamie uncovered. A tongue older than memory, dripping with promises and curses that threaten to unravel everything I thought I was. My reflection has become a nightmare I cannot escape. Each time I see my face in a window or mirror, it shatters and reforms into a grotesque mask of fractured glass, teeth gleaming where flesh should be, eyes sunken deep with hollow black holes that stare back with unbearable hunger. A face not my own, but the mouth's visage slowly claiming me, carving me into its endless spiral of silence and gnashing teeth. I have tried everything to fight back, to find some way to hold onto the last shreds of who I am, but the spirals branded into my skin burn hotter every day, glowing faintly under the surface like a living thing, pulsing in sync with the maddening. Gnashing within my jaw, each pulse a cruel reminder that I am already caught, sealed by a ritual older than any law or history, and that the spiral does not end but tightens, dragging me deeper into the darkness where voices are swallowed and teeth never stop grinding. Detective Monroe's warnings haunt me still. He told me once that the mouth feeds not just on flesh but on memory and voice, that it's a curse passed down through generations, binding souls in an endless cycle of fear and silence, and that I am both the last witness and the final victim, destined to either become its voice or be consumed utterly in its grinding maw. I feel it drawing closer every day, the pull of that twisted tree mouth altered deep in the forest where spirals glow faintly on bark and bone, roots curling like sharp teeth waiting to snap shut, and I know that very soon I will have to make a choice, speak the forbidden name carved into those spirals and break the cycle at a terrible cost, or open my mouth and be swallowed whole by the endless gnashing teeth and the silence worse than death. The gnashing grows louder now, a cacophony inside my skull that drowns out reason, and as I write these words, my hands shake and my breath is ragged, because the spiral tightens and the mouth waits, patient and hungry, ready to claim the next voice, ready to pull me into the dark forever, and I can only pray that someone out there will heed this warning, will resist the spiral, and will never let the mouth speak. Through them, the spiral's grip has become unbearable, tightening like an iron band around my very soul, squeezing out every last fragment of hope and sanity until all that remains is the gnashing teeth grinding mercilessly beneath my flesh, sharp, cruel, and growing faster with each passing hour, turning my mouth into a cavernous prison where every word I try to speak becomes a struggle, a desperate fight against the darkness that threatens to swallow me whole. Sleep offers no mercy, only plunging me into that endless nightmare where I stand trapped inside the mouth's cavernous throat. A labyrinth of bone and spirals that pulse with a sickly, unnatural light, walls closing in as ghostly faces pressed between jagged teeth whisper the spiral's forbidden name, their hollow eyes locked on mine with pleading that cuts deeper than any blade, begging me to remember, to speak, to break free, or to join them forever in the silence that devours everything. The scratches on my arms have morphed into raised scars glowing faintly beneath the skin, a map of torment etched by the mouth itself, and I can feel the dark pulse of those spirals sinking with the relentless gnashing inside my jaw, a cruel heartbeat that mocks every attempt I make to resist the ancient curse that Detective Monroe described in whispered warnings. The knowledge that this is not just a curse but a ritual older than memory, one designed to trap voices and souls in a ceaseless cycle of fear, silence, and hunger. I've returned countless times to that twisted tree in the forest, its bark scarred with the spirals that seem to breathe and pulse with a malevolent life, the roots curling like sharp teeth ready to clamp shut, and every visit drags me deeper into a waking nightmare where the mouth's breath is cold against my skin and its whispers wrap around my mind like chains, promising release if I surrender, oblivion if I resist. Detective Monroe's face haunts my every thought, his eyes sunken with exhaustion and fear, his voice trembling as he tells me the truth I cannot deny, that I am the last link in a chain of victims bound by the spiral, destined either to become the mouth's voice, breaking the cycle but losing myself forever, or to be swallowed whole, added to the legion of silent souls trapped in the gnashing darkness beneath the earth. The world around me warps and twists, reflections shatter into fractured faces with jagged teeth and hollow eyes. Every shadow holds a lurking presence, and the gnashing grows louder inside my skull, drowning out reason and will with the cruel rhythm of teeth grinding bone. I write this now as my final confession, a desperate plea to anyone who might find it. Beware the spiral, resist the whispers, and above all, never let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, the spiral never ends, and the silence that follows is a nightmare worse than death itself, eternal and merciless. It's impossible to explain the way the mouth has twisted my world into a nightmare that I can't wake from, a waking terror that gnaws at every part of my being and warps reality around me like a dark reflection in a broken mirror. The spirals etched into my skin have grown larger, their sickly glow pulsing beneath the surface like the beating of a corrupted heart, and the teeth grinding inside my jaw have multiplied so much that I can feel them slicing through soft flesh with every breath and every word I try to form, turning my voice into shards of agony that crack and splinter, a broken symphony echoing the endless gnashing deep within the mouth's cavernous abyss. Every reflection has become a haunting image of fractured glass and shadows, my face splitting and melting into that of my missing brother, Jamie, his eyes wide with terror, and sometimes into the faceless figure wearing that grotesque shattered mirror mask I saw in the warehouse, its grin a cruel reminder of the spirals. Hunger that never ceases and never sleeps. Sleep itself has betrayed me, offering only endless descent into that cavern of bone and spirals where countless lost souls scream silently, trapped behind teeth that grind and snap with relentless fury, their hollow eyes fixed on me with desperate hope and unspeakable fear as the voices whisper the spiral's ancient and forbidden name, a word that promises freedom if spoken but death if silenced. And I wake trembling, gasping for breath, my jaw aching, and my mind frayed by the terrible knowledge that the mouth is waiting, always waiting to swallow the next voice. Detective Monroe's fading visits haunt me, his warnings now tinged with despair as he reveals more about the ritual, a curse passed down through generations to bind voices and souls in the spiral's eternal prison, and that I am the final link, the last witness, caught in a nightmare where the only choices are to speak the forbidden name and become the mouth's voice or to be consumed, utterly by the endless gnashing teeth and silence worse than death. I've become a ghost in my own life, haunted by shadows that flicker in the corner of my vision, by whispers that curl around my thoughts like chains, by spirals glowing faintly beneath my skin that throb with a terrible life of their own, and by the gnashing that never stops, growing louder and louder until it drowns out all reason, all hope, all resistance. The forest calls me still, the twisted tree-mouth altar waiting, patiently for the final sacrifice, roots curling like teeth ready to bite, bark carved deep with the spirals that pulse like a heartbeat. And I know the time is near when I will have to stand before it and make the impossible choice, to speak or to be silenced forever. This story, these words are all I have left to reach beyond the spiral, a desperate plea to anyone who finds this warning. Do not follow the spiral, do not listen to the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, the spiral never ends, and the silence that follows is a nightmare worse than death itself, eternal, merciless, and infinite. I feel the mouth's presence growing stronger every day, a crushing weight pressing down on me from within, as if the gnashing teeth beneath my gums are not only tearing at flesh but also ripping apart the very fabric of my mind, fracturing my memories and twisting reality until I can no longer tell where I end and the spiral begins. The spirals carved into my skin have expanded into intricate, glowing tattoos that pulse with a sickly rhythm, syncing with the relentless grinding that echoes through my jaw and skull like a death march, and every attempt to speak, to cry out, to call for help is met with excruciating pain, the jagged teeth slicing through my tongue and cheeks as if the mouth itself will not allow my voice to escape unscathed. Reflections have become unbearable, mirrors and windows shatter into shards, revealing a kaleidoscope of distorted faces. My brother Jamie's haunted eyes pleading for rescue, the cracked mirror mask grinning maliciously, and my own face warped, beyond recognition, a grotesque mask of terror and despair, reminding me that the mouth is consuming not just my body but my very identity, erasing who I was and reshaping me into a vessel for its endless hunger. Sleep is a battlefield where I am trapped within that cavernous mouth, walls closing in like the coils of a serpent, surrounded by the silent screams of countless souls caught in the spiral's snare, their hollow eyes burning with desperation, their voices a maddening chorus whispering the forbidden name that could free or doom us all, and I awake with my mouth bloodied, heart pounding, and sanity hanging by a thread. Detective Monroe's warnings echo louder now. This curse is ancient, a binding ritual older than time, designed to trap voices and souls in a cycle of fear and silence, and I am the last link, the final sacrifice who must either speak the spiral's name and become the mouth's voice or be devoured entirely, swallowed by the gnashing darkness where no light or hope exists. I have returned again and again to the forest, to that terrible tree with bark carved in glowing spirals, roots like jagged teeth waiting to clamp shut, feeling the mouth's cold breath brush my skin, its whispers wrapping around my mind like iron chains, promising release if I surrender or oblivion if I resist. And I know the choice is mine, a terrible destiny that will define eternity. I write this now as my final confession and warning, a desperate plea for anyone who finds these words, to resist the spiral, to ignore the whispers, and to never, ever let the mouth speak through them. Because once it does, the spiral is unbreakable, the silence eternal, and the gnashing teeth never stop grinding, feeding on every lost voice, forever. Now, as I sit here in the fading light, writing what may be my last words, the gnashing inside my mouth grows louder, relentless, as if the teeth beneath my gums are sharpening for the final act, and the spirals beneath my skin pulse with a furious, unnatural rhythm syncing with the pounding of my heart. A cruel countdown to the inevitable. I have come to understand the truth too late. The mouth is not just a curse or a monster, but a force woven into the very fabric of this place. An ancient spiral of hunger and silence that consumes not only flesh but memories, voices, and souls, twisting them into endless echoes trapped behind jaws of bone, forever grinding, forever silent, save for the sound of teeth gnashing in the dark. Detective Monroe's warnings ring in my ears still, a desperate plea to break the cycle, but I am caught in its teeth, caught in the spiral's tightening coil, and the choice that once seemed mine now feels like a trap laid long ago by forces beyond comprehension. A choice to speak the forbidden name, breaking the curse but losing myself, or to fall silent and become just another lost voice swallowed by the mouth's endless hunger. The twisted tree at the forest's edge stands waiting, roots curling like the cruel teeth of a predator, its bark glowing faintly with the spiral's unholy light, calling me home, and I know that soon I will stand before it, the final witness to the ritual, the last soul to face the gnashing darkness, and that my fate is sealed. In the spiral's endless loop, this story is my final act of defiance and warning to anyone who might find it. Do not follow the spiral, do not heed the whispers, and above all, do not let the mouth speak through you, because once it does, there is no escape, only the endless gnashing teeth and the silence worse than death itself, eternal, merciless, and all-consuming. If you read this, know that I fought with every breath to hold on, but the mouth is patient and hungry, and soon it will claim me. 2. Adding my voice to the silent chorus trapped forever in the spiral's gnashing maw. And then, perhaps, it will come for you.